I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education retreat today to order. Adam, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Argo.
Present.
Mr. Horton.
Here.
Mr. Wynn. Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Ms. Casper.
Here. Can you please join me in the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Second.
Any discussion? Jake, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Argo.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer. Ms. Casper.
Yes. I'd just like to let everybody know that Mr. Wynn has a class today, so he will not be joining us. Unfortunately, when we found out he could not be here, it was too late to change our date, so we will make sure that we connect with him on it. Dr. Wiley, it's all you.
We're having a little bit of technology difficulties with our extending this morning, but that's no harm, no foul. You have slides printed out. We only have about 2 to reference today, so all days for the technology not to cooperate. As Adam would say, it's just too early to get it percolated because the high school schedules are rough. So we're going to start out today just with another little bit of icebreaker, kind of team building piece. And actually, if I'm really honest, I kind of pillaged this from my AP language teaching days, not my AP lit, my AP lit. So, and we kind of modified it a little bit. So, if you're familiar at all with AP planning, so it's normally an 11th grade class, it's a lot about synthesis. There's a synthesis question, and children are given a variety of sources that seemingly are random at best. And in the moment, they read a prompt, and they have to take all of those sources and they have to be able to integrate them into their answer. Some of them are pictures, some of them are poems, some of them are readings. So that kind of got me intrigued. I don't know why I was in that. Maybe it was because I was at the superintendent's conference and there was just all kinds of good stuff. They got me in the teaching mode. So we're going to play a little bit of a pivot on that. Okay, I'm going to show you some random objects. Okay, we're going to synthesize this one. That's pretty high powered skill. Okay, so we have a picture of a bridge. It is not important that it's the Golden Gate for this, it's just a bridge. This is the one Adam can pick, our favorite images. We have one post-it note with a question mark on it. Okay. We have a mirror. We have a rubber band. Color, not important. We have a puzzle piece. Don't worry, there's not a trick that you have to recall these facts. Okay, I'll show them to you.
Good thing.
There is a key that nobody in the office knows exists.
Yeah.
There is a school bus toy fitting for our conversation this morning. A flashlight. This is the one I keep with my candy taster. That's going to do something for you. And there's a small wee little plane. Okay. So I'm going to borrow this chair real quick because your exercise is to group these items. Okay. Now, you have to have at least 2 in a group. I want you to take an individual moment. Okay, so these are your items, are right here. Okay, take an individual moment and I want you to group these items in a way that makes sense to you. Group them however you want. You have to have at least 2 groups. Every item must be you, so you can't have an outlier. Okay, so right now, the instructions are no talking. It's what makes sense in your brain and how you group them. There's no right answer. And you can group them however you want. Function, symbolism, future, color, utility, combination, whatever you want. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. 3 like magic number, I don't know why. But about 3 minutes to group in a way that makes sense to your brain. And you will have to explain. Probably should clarify. You can't just have a random that you stick in there. That'd really explain.
How many groups do we have to
You have
have?
at least two. And every item must be used.
What is next, the mirror?
A puzzle piece. The puzzle piece, the bus is toy bus. Mirror, key, rubber band, flashlight, post-it with a question mark, plant, bridge.
Is there a minimum, how many you have to have in a group?
Nope. Just gotta have two groups and every item must be used. So it doesn't have to be equal representation in each group. Again, no right answer, let's just have make sense to you. Very good. Okay. Again, no right answer, just let's make sense to you, right? All right, Adam, tell us how you grouped them,
I did the puzzle piece and the question mark
okay? Why?
because they were puzzle and question, kind of similar to me.
Okay.
I made a little mini greenhouse with a plant, light, mirror, and the rubber band to hold it all together.
Oh, okay.
And then the bus, key, and the bridge.
And what, tell me about that.
The key to start the bus, and then the bridge to drive over the water.
Okay, so utility, okay, nice.
That was it. That's all of them.
So you had
Three
three
groups.
groups. You had the plant,
It's like a
the greenhouse,
haiku or something.
and
2, 4, 2, 3.
no, 5, 5, 7, 5. That's okay.
But I was.
So we had greenhouse, we had the utility of getting the bus across the bridge, and then we had like, I'm gonna call it the enigma, right? The
Yeah.
question and the puzzle, okay? Julie?
I also did 3 groups, but mine was kind of past, present and future, or past transition and future. So I did the mirror and the plant together to reflect on where we've been and where we are right now, planted and grounded. I then did the transition of the bus and the bridge, the flashlight and the question mark to question and move forward. And see the light of where we might be going, and then the rubber band, the puzzle and the key to stretch and to solve the puzzle of where we might, what might be the key to our future success.
So you made it very.
Okay, no one can go after that.
Okay, you made it very personal, but very symbolic, right? Adam's was much more kind of literal
Literal.
utilitarian. Julie's was much more symbolic and tied it to today, right?
And I can't.
Okay, Alex,
So I had the flashlight, the mirror, the question posted, and a puzzle piece. They were all kind of things that help us see or understand things better. Then I had the school bus, the rubber band, the bridge, the key, and the plant as kind of things that helped us connect things like or get to where you want to go. School bus gets you from A to B, bridge does the same thing, rubber band connects things. Key helps us open the door to get to where we want to go, and it just seemed like the only other place that made sense for the plant. I was struggling with where the plant would go. It seemed like it went quite better with those.
all right, Doug,
So I started with the plant and the post-it note with the question mark, which was attached to the plant as the reminder of, did you remember to water me? And then I had a kid playing with the school bus. And the key was his pretend key to start up the bus with rubber band attached to it as the keychain. And the puzzle piece he was using as the kids on the bus to like transport over the bridge. Or no, the bridge wasn't part of this, sorry. Then I had another group, which was the story of the Battle of Sivachia in 1942.
Good God.
Which was when the bridge was being attacked by fighter planes. The villagers defended it by shining flashlights into mirrors and blinding the pilots.
nice,
Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
creative, very creative and very like tapping into your prior schema, right? That maybe nobody else was aware of, but you're like, I know this nugget.
This is theater, man.
Okay.
Or I made it all up.
Okay, fair,
Oh, good
fair.
God, I should have gone first.
Kelly,
I put the bridge, the plant, the mirror, and the rubber band in one group because you can put the plant on the bridge to get the light, and the mirror you can position in case the light isn't hitting the plant properly, and then the rubber band is to hold the plant up as it grows taller. In case it falls.
Okay.
The bus and the flashlight are in one group as children's toys.
okay,
I mean, a child would play the bus, my kids love playing flashlights, and that's a little flashlight.
this is true.
So, and then I put the key, the puzzle, and the post-it in one group because they're all mysteries. You need the answer to why there's a question mark on the post-it. You need more pieces to make the puzzle work, and you need to know what key unlocks. So they're all kind of a mystery category.
I just grabbed random objects just so you know. I didn't do this exercise beforehand, so I did it in the moment as well. I had connection, like the bus, the bridge, the rubber band. I did not even think about the rubber band in connection to the plant, just so you know. So y'all are very like green thumb people. And a key, right? It connects me into my house. And then kind of light and reflection, the bridge, the mirror, the flashlight, the plant needs light. And I was thinking of the question mark posted as like a eureka, like the light bulb went on. So those were my two groups. So I want, again, the thing was there's no right answer. Okay, so the same object appears in a variety of ways, right? There's different logic systems, clearly, right, from Doug's, and all are valid, right? All are valid. So some questions as a whole group for us to think about. What surprised you when we were doing this exercise? What surprised you?
How different our solutions were.
How different the solutions were. What else?
Or how you can take different objects and use them different ways, and how people think you can use different objects different ways.
Anything else? Kind of like yesterday, things that seemingly have nothing in common can have things in common, right? This is a really cool exercise to do with children's backpacks, or if you have a connection with kids, like a connection class, you can like take a purse. The world is your oyster of things that you can find in children's backpacks and things. What did you hear that you hadn't considered? For me, like the plant, as soon as Adam said that about the plant in the greenhouse, I was like, okay, that's really cool. I didn't think about the plant and the rubber band at all, because I'm just not, I don't grow things. I kill things, but I don't grow things, right? What else surprised you, or things that you hadn't considered?
The fact that what you use to ward off intruders is a children's toy.
That's how you can just throw the school bus at them. The intruders.
Anything else?
I think I always forget that Doug has a theater background. And so. It surprised me, but then didn't surprise me that he came up with, and I will be looking up what story. Okay, that's
Fact
okay.
checking, fact checking.
Yeah. So I think that was interesting and that, I think Julie spoke to her analytical mind. I mean, she, you know, she's very analytical and there's a lot of deep thought there.
A lot of connection to the
Yeah.
moment we're in,
Yeah,
right?
and quickly,
And quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. We did that in 3 minutes.
right.
Right?
Well, I loved it out, because I was like Alex too, there was like the rubber band was my last one. I'm like, what the heck, am I putting the rubber band? It was there to me, like, okay, let's put it here, old plan.
So timing, it was interesting. I didn't give you a lot of time. Just for reference, when a child does this on an AP English exam, they have 90 minutes. They have 90 minutes to read the prompt, they have 90 minutes to look at all of the sources, they have 90 minutes total to write the essay. So it is like quick, right? So this exercise, normally like an AP line, you do this a lot, right? So that they can get into like commonalities, and there's always the one object in there that like trumps like 6 people, right? Normally it's an image. Your kid's like, what is this random image of, and how does this go with anything? Now, we're gonna, yeah,
Context. The context is we deal with this all the time, all day, every day, all of us. In the context that each one of us said, it did make sense. But out of context, it might not. And so, you know, at that situation, at that time, I can say in my world, I've said this a lot of, we have to assume that at the time it made sense. Even though today it may not. Yeah, nobody's doing things goofy for no apparent reason, we like to believe anyhow. So, you know, the context of that is kind of jumped out of me.
so Adam's gonna bring us full circle with kind of that comment, but we got one more step before we get there, okay? Individually, we created different ways from our perspectives, all valid. But guess what? We don't operate 7 different people, right? We operate as one. So, as a group, we have to decide which grouping that you've heard, and you can piece them together. Which grouping represents us collectively? We have to agree on one grouping. Not everybody gets their first choice, and we all have to be able to support the cause. We had to pick one grouping that we liked the best. What would we say?
One out of the,
I know one's there.
Yeah,
not one person,
No,
one
one
grouping.
grouping, one grouping. So you might be able to take Adam's greenhouse and a little bit of Doug's bridge of Terabithia. I don't know what it's called. Right?
Very different story.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, that's go back, yeah. Which grouping do we like the best?
I like the greenhouse.
Okay, so the greenhouse included, what did the greenhouse include, Adam? The
Plant, the
plant,
light, the mirror, and the rubber band.
the light, the mirror.
Does
And
that
then
not
rubber
make
band.
those items off the table?
Well, then that means we would have to select another group that would have the key, the question mark, and the bridge. Am I missing
And the
anything?
bus.
And the bus.
And the puzzle piece.
But can it have the other item? Any one of the other items as well? So something will probably get left out here.
Either, or you will have to commit to one person's idea.
Um,
So you either, have
Yours was the bridge.
to- you either have to
bus
pillage accordingly,
Connection.
or you
I
have
had
to.
bridge, bus, flashlight, question mark together.
So Adam, what'd you have? The bridge,
I put the puzzle and the question together.
but in your greenhouse.
You have the plan.
Plant, light, mirror, and rubber band.
Those are off the table.
Yeah. So that would be key, bridge, puzzle piece, bus, and sticky note with question mark.
So I did have the bridge, bus, question mark. Is kind of the transition.
Okay,
So
the bridge, bus, question mark.
I got a flashlight in there too, but so that's
And
been
you
used.
posted, so,
That's like
Okay.
key and puzzle piece.
okay,
So
so
that
mine are all
then-
out, you can't use any. They're all out. Can't use any of my groups at all, they're all done.
Well, your greenhouse was too complicated, used too many.
I did,
Pivotal
I did,
pieces,
yeah.
you know.
This is why we have to have the whole picture before we go ahead and make our decisions. We didn't know it was gonna be this game.
Right,
So if we, so Wait, but are we supposed to pick a single person's?
You might,
Or we can, like, no, but I'm
So
saying,
you can't take groups, things out of other people's groups, but that would should.
like, can we create a new group without, because again, we can't use one second one because it pulled out flashlights.
So we can't any of mine, they all,
So then we have to go.
we have to go with somebody.
Pull this apart, so that's
Synergy somewhere.
so I think it's either, so I think we've touched on some things. You can either pillage. And you can try to move it. You can pick one individual and just say, we're committing to that, right?
Well,
Or,
Yours is a plant, light, mirror, and rubber band together.
and then what was the other one?
Well,
Julie,
we
Flynn,
can, because like we said, we have to use a whole grouping and I have the flashlight.
I thought you wanted the ones you just said you didn't know. You have.
It had a flashlight in there as well, but I thought we could take 3 of the 4, but I was.
Or- I just said, come up, with it, right? Julie's question is, what if we go, well, can't make any of that work, we gotta come up with a whole new grouping. And maybe, it's like you got 3 options at least.
It's over on the chair right now.
Keith.
What's the bus bridge posted? Is that a grouping?
The bus bridge posted is the
That was Julie's connection.
the transition.
But I also,
She
she
also
also
had
had,
flash
but then, like, isn't Adam and mine, which, again, don't know. Roll up, like, if we would do that.
I just said grouping.
Yeah, we can have 3 groups, sounds like that. You all.
But can we make new groups?
Yeah,
It
why
sounds
not?
like it, yeah.
Okay.
And then we can, so the puzzle and the key are the.
Like
the future, yeah.
So
What's the connection on
we're
the bridge
making
to the bus?
connections to grow the future. To unlock the future.
What's the connection on the bus, bridge, and posted?
Transition. Questioning.
So you
that,
got
like,
transition, you have greenhouse, and you have, I'm gonna say like unlocking or connecting or something here.
Solving.
Solving.
So it's funny, I can see Kelly's brain, like Kelly, is it fair that you don't like that they don't seem cohesive?
A little bit.
Seem a little random.
See, when you stay behind.
I can't grasp the transition in the bus and the bridge and the post-it, but,
Let's say we're making connections instead of transition.
okay.
We're making connections to grow our students.
Oh, now look at
I
Doug.
like that, that's.
Doug, one more time, say
That
it
was a
again.
story.
We are making connections to grow our students to unlock the future.
Okay,
Almost like marketer.
now,
Did we just make a strategic plan?
Flip check.
so, I will say, good job, we ended up in a good spot, but I want us to reflect on it, Adam kind of was taking us there. What are the key takeaways of this activity that we just did that are relevant to us today as a Board of Education? You know, Adam said, when you make a decision, you have the parameters that you have the context that you have, right? And he's right in that. You only have the data that you have at a given time. If you take one of those objects away and replace it with a different one, you've got a different set, right? What else then?
Be willing to be flexible and,
Well, I think understanding other people's thought process. I think that's a big takeaway, understanding why people put objects together. I mean, you have to understand.
Be curious.
So people.
You have to be serious, right?
I thought it was kind of neat that you put them all together, then you make a decision, separate them out, then we almost got to the consensus of. Okay, well, now that everybody shared their ideas, it's okay, everybody work together, come up with different.
Yeah.
We almost got there,
Come to the
we did, we ended up getting that last chair in the right context, so that everybody goes, that's actually a good idea, then.
Yeah.
So we moved from individual thinking to collective, right? You had to listen, you had to weigh ideas, and finally you had to choose a direction together. And that's government. When we choose a direction together, not as individuals, right? It doesn't mean we always get our first choice. It doesn't mean our viewpoints don't differ. It doesn't mean that once the decision is made, you're not grappling with like, wait, how do we fit together? I don't think these are cohesive, but then somebody can explain it and we go, okay, that light bulb went on for me, I can get behind that. Right? And I think from this activity, it's about having that full voice and really iterating and problem solving and brainstorming. Because our community oftentimes, and this is not a negative, they see 7 people, right? Because it's 7 people that we interact with, that they know, that they call, that they email, that they see at the grocery store. But ultimately, even though those 7 individuals, it's really important that people see us as that collective, right? It is that kind of one voice, not knowing that we grappled all of this stuff behind the scenes to get there. I do think that's one beautiful thing about master facilities is people are seeing that struggle. Like, I think that's good that they're seeing that conversation and they're seeing that, but ultimately, through those individual perspectives and through that dialogue, we have to come to in everyday decisions, unified action of what that is, right? And like I said, your narrative that Doug kind of landed on at the end, I didn't even anticipate that, right? But that's what came out of that discussion is because we could see a team member going, I don't know, that seems kind of random to me. How are we gonna pitch that?
Yeah,
How are we gonna pitch that? And that's where Betsy comes in, help a lot of times, like Betsy, massage this.
This for us.
So we're gonna kind of lead out of this into our next activity, and our next activity, which when Julie was sharing hers, it kind of, I just smiled because of this activity, okay? So we are going to think about our district store, okay? So you have posters in front of you, blue. They're all the same color, so that you don't know who wrote what. But in theory, if you're like any good teacher, you know handwriting, right? So I want you to take a minute and think about these 3 questions. Okay? Again, no right or wrong answers. I want you to think about put one item per post-it. Okay, if we need more post-its, I can certainly give you some, but one idea per post-it. And I want you to think about what must we preserve, hold on to. So that's the past. Present's over here. What are we proud of right now? And then future, what must be different? Those can be big things, those can be small things, those can be very tangible things, they can be very abstract things, but take a moment, jot all your ideas down, one per post-it, and then when you're done, kind of put them in the according spot. Okay? So you can have as many as you want each time. Just one per post-it.
Then when do we put them up there?
Whenever you're done.
Adam, you overachiever. Good documents. Good go.
Just so you know.
It's 10:30. The 10:30.
It's weird how orderly the present one is.
No, and then the other ones are, well, they're pretty orderly. I joke with people, like, now they tell you to do a collage and art, can't do it,
Yeah,
can't do it.
I know.
It's too, I have to have it very linear, like I don't do the good overlap. All right, so Doug made it more random, I like it. Okay. Let's start with what must be preserved. Okay, and see what we have in common, see kind of what, we have community. We have, whose is this, community? Tell me what you mean by that, Alex, like the community itself or community like the feeling?
Just like the support, the coming togetherness of the community
Okay.
and the feeling.
So community, sense of belonging is there, I'd say that's very similar. Sense of pride, right, that's kind of similar, Lakota pride. Keeping a place, or keeping Lakota a place where students want to raise their children, I'd say that still falls over here. History of our district. And our story. That's pretty clear.
Feels achievable.
I mean, that is pretty clear. Right? I mean, that is, we want to respect where we've been. We don't want to ignore that, and we shouldn't ignore that. Right? Some of us have scars. Some of us have tails. Some of us, not tails, but tails, right? But we want that community feeling, that pride, all of those pieces. Okay? Now let's do present. What are we proud of right now? Okay, we have sense of community. So we understand we've had a sense of community. We feel like we have that now. We have great students and staff. Opportunities. This one says healing. I'm gonna put that over here in sense of community. Staff commitment. I'll put that with great students and staff. Students. The pride our community has, so that's kind of in this category. Student achievement, is that a separate category, or do we want that with opportunities and staff and students? Is that a little different? A little different?
I think it's a
Okay.
separate category.
Student growth. Families feel supported. We put maybe that over here with sense of community and how far we've come. Whose is this one? Okay, I didn't talk to me about that.
That was very broad.
Is it okay?
And that's in a lot of ways. Yeah, and that's in the
So-
technology world, you know,
Read the top.
I didn't.
Here.
Yeah, I wasn't here
Right.
before 13, but you know, we've accomplished a lot of things with that levy of 13. We've accomplished a lot of things over the last 4 years. You know, working as a board together with everybody, so.
I like that, like, we've come a long way in student achievement, we've come a long way in opportunities, we've come a long way with our staff and our students and recognizing just how great they are and what all they do for our community and how we support our community, how we support our family. Right? Pretty cohesive. Right, pretty cohesive. Okay? Now this one. Now, it's interesting because this question doesn't say. What would you like to be different? Like, what can, it doesn't say that, it says what?
Must.
What must? We're saying like this has got to change. We respect the past, we're proud of this, not paying any. We're not discounting any of this, but we're saying this has got to be different. Okay? World languages, K-12, opportunities, right? Enhancement of arts in elementary, and we'll put that as an opportunity. Reaching all students and their educational needs, not just gifted and special ed. I'm gonna put that in a separate one. Master facilities. Sustainable long-term financial plan, regular levies. I think I know this, but you know, maybe not. You're maybe, right?
What made,
Okay, fine. This one is, this is me, 5 stars. Right, 5 stars. I'm gonna say this right here, reaching all students, right? World-class gifted curriculum K-12. I could maybe, we wanted it reaching all students, or do we want it opportunities? Probably reaching all students. We'll put it there. Expand partnerships. Busing. Can you tell it's on my brain this morning? Can't help it. Engagement, that's the part. Well, engagement is probably separate. Class sizes. Maybe here, like opportunity. A master facilities project to match our growing population and the educational changes. Community partnerships. Planning around obstacles. We'll put that here. I'm actually gonna put busing around planning around obstacles. Right? Could we put this with master facilities or separate? Is busing and planning around obstacles with master facilities or separate? Separate, okay. Speed of change. Whose is this?
which one?
Speed of change. Me, Julie, talk to me about that.
That our world is evolving more quickly and we have to evolve quickly with.
Okay. So I'm gonna, hold on, I'm gonna use our Adam technique from our present. So I put engagement, I moved engagement down here into partnerships, because when people are engaged, you have a partnership, they show up, they involve, conversations. This one is mine, this one I think this, Adam, is this your expanded partnerships?
I'm using the planning around obstacles.
Like, this is yours, Julie? So I was thinking more like what we've started with the community summit, you know what I mean, and the partnerships with the trustees and things. But then this one was also mine, engagement of how do we get parents? I continue to respecting where we are, but 400 people can't fill out a survey. Right. And 2,000 people can't show up to a listening session. We've got to figure out what is that. And it's really funny. This was a huge topic at the conference I was at, a huge topic. You had everything from the thought exchange people there to the parent square people there to somebody doing strategic planning saying there were people that now do strategic plans without physical in-person opportunities because of AI. And I was like, oh, and I think I put a little damper. I said, I don't love that. I said, I want to see people's face. I want to feel it in the room. It was interesting because you got to know your community. Because some communities can get away with that, some can't, right? So we have partnerships, we have money, right? Money is in all of this, really. Put that up here. We have planning around obstacles and busing. We have master facilities. And then we have students and opportunities for students, right? So I think we have some people issues, some people things that we want to accomplish. We also have some tangible, you can see it, you can build it, they will come kind of ideas. And then you have some, we don't do that without our community partnerships. And I would even argue that this community partnership one, it says regular levies. Well, guess what? You have regular levies when people do what? Pass the buck. Right. Right? Which is community partnership and engagement. But I think this one's interesting too. Speed of change. Speed of change, right? And you have to find, there's a sense of the world is moving around you all the time. There's also I'm going to think of master facilities. We've been talking about this forever. We gotta get there. We gotta get there. We gotta get there. But it's got to be right. And it's gotta be fiscally responsible. And also that speed of change has to match the future visioning, so we don't leave people in weird spots once all of us are not sitting here. And then you have, what can people handle? What is the speed of change of capacity that people can handle? And that's real, right? And when I say people, I would say our community, but also the organization itself. Sometimes an organization can handle a rate of change that the community cannot. Or vice versa, the community's like, come on, and these are like, I need more time, right? Let's talk about this in a little bit. What do we think our speed of change is? Like right now, if you had to define, are we the tortoise? Are we the hare? Are we somewhere in the middle? Like, what is our rate of change from your perspective?
I think it would depend on,
Does it depend on the topic?
yes, I think it would depend on the topic.
On a scale of 1 to 10, a 4.
But that's what we are. What do you think? Speak.
For me, the work, the facilities is still care, or still, I people, we've been talking about it for so long.
Okay, so let's, cause I think you're leading into maybe my next iteration.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think that's good. I hadn't thought of it, until you said it. So it's good. What if, I heard a 4. Right now, our rate of change is at 4. Right? Do we agree with that? And I'm gonna follow up with something that Kelly just made me think of. Do we agree with that? Kind of in the middle-ish?
feel like we're in that ballpark.
Okay.
I think we're, again, I think it would depend, I think some things are faster at, some things.
But collective average,
I would.
4 or 5, 4 or
Yeah,
5, kind of in the middle.
in the middle.
Okay. Is that the rate of change that we want?
No.
So I asked you, what you drive, I'm like, well, maybe the rate of change we are, is not the rate of change we want. Okay, Kelly said pretty impact, no.
No, I think we need, no, I'm not good.
Well, that's what we're not, like, Kelly, what would you, if you said, if I was aiming for a number, what would it be? Or a 5, or 4?
For total rate of change. Obviously, we're not gonna get to a 10 overnight, but I think we need to be at least a 7.
Okay.
We need to be 7. I think we're getting left behind in some aspects of education.
I don't think a 10 would be good, but I think 7's a good place to be.
I mean, a 10 would be great, it's kind of like 5 stars, we love 5 stars, but we get there. overnight.
I was thinking, I can see it, the head is
No,
popping.
it's hard, it's hard to say this one to me, because 5, I think of it more like I was looking at a frequency. Because when we see the changes that we do, we have fast spots, we have slow spots, and the more we could get to a 5, the faster we would become. The more, because then it's smoother. We're, I
You're
think,
less evident.
I think we have like on the master facility, I think we were like the reverse hair. We spent 8 years that felt like we were sleeping and finished, and then we got fast, so
Or steady.
if we could. It was hard visual, because on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going +5, -5 of the fast and slow.
Not for that.
I think you also, I think that's a good point, and I think remembering, when I was at the conference, the superintendent said, I was the 4th superintendent in 5 years. And I'm like, 4 and 2, but 4 and 2, right? But I do think that that's real. That rate of
Yes.
change absolutely slows down when there's that much.
No, big
Yeah.
enough.
And really interesting, I wrote it down in my notebook, the exact quote that he gave. But the data shows that if you have sustained leadership, he did not define that as just a superintendent role, but he said if the district has sustained leadership for 5 to 7 years, the student achievement will naturally increase between 5 to 10% because of that stability. Because you can gain traction in initiatives, you can, you have a vision, you're all working towards that vision. I mean, when he said that, I was like, oh, like, just stability. right? And so when you think about that and that kind of history of what we went through, that explains a lot of why that rate of change like slowed down a little bit, because there wasn't sustainability in a lot of ways, right? Or stableness, because the leadership was changing. There was some board dynamics, like we felt that for sure. Gotta
It's
respect
hard.
that, but we gotta learn from that.
It's hard when you have an election every 2 years too, because you just don't know what. You're probably always going to have at least one new seat at the table just by people deciding not to run or. And even with one person new at the table, there's still that. Even if it's someone like Doug or Alex or, that's been involved, there's still that learning curve that you have to figure out how to. Like baptism by fire, like they just you drink out on a fire hose. It's because when you think you reached out to a new board member and caught them up to speed, you're still forgetting things. And it's hard because 3 people can't sit down, 2 people can't sit down, and train them after their swimming. It's that whole.
I
So-
think. Okay.
Well, I was gonna say, I've seen the same statistics as some of the COSPA or and OSDA about that continuity.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things is. We look at it as the people, right? But the engagement that you have with the community, the stability that you put in the organization helps retain really good people. And so I think that's where if we can figure out how do we get that engagement from the community and that support, that enables us to keep good superintendents and good treasurers that allows us to have a stable board because you're not getting the knee-jerk reactions that now we want to go this way, I want to go that way.
That pendulum that you feel quite a-
And I think my experience has been from when my kids started 13, 14 years ago to now. We have less engagement. I think COVID was a big factor that we spent a year and a half telling people not to come into our schools and they got into that habit. And when I talk with our PTSO organizations, they feel like because they don't have enough bodies to man all the community events that drives that engagement and stuff. And so I think we can figure out how do we build that engagement with our community that leads to that long-term kind of move.
And how do we do it differently? Because one of the things they talked about at the President's Council last week was. At the high school level, especially how many people since COVID. Have gone back to work, like how many moms have gone back to work full time, and how do we make that engagement like look different? So that we can get engaged.
That rate of change, that's an interesting one. I mean, that's an interesting one to discuss, was where we are. Really, because it's good to know where a board and a community leadership feels about that rate of change, because, change is good until people start feeling comfortable.
Right.
Everybody's good until it's like, wait a minute, you're changing me and now I'm not good, right? But
Theoretically, it's
Right.
good.
everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm good with change, and then you do something that upsets their apple cart, and you're like, well, no, I'm gonna change over there, right? Not change, not change to me. But also, I mean, I do think. And you can think about different communities around us, right? Some communities. Are about, their rate of change is pretty slow. They like for you to just polish it up. They don't really want to change, they just want you to polish. Right, we're good, just polish us a little bit. Some are like, the world is on fire, and you got to fix us now. Right, I would say, and I don't want to speak for her, but there's a district around us, the superintendent currently feels like it is on fire. Riffing people, losing people, it feels like it's on fire. Right now, does it feel like that to everybody else? I don't know, but to her world, it feels like this rate of change has got we got to stop, right? Like, we got to do something. And then there are some people kind of in that 5 to 7 spot that are like, we just need we need a nice rate. We don't need to feel that ebb and craziness. We don't need it to feel like this. We just need to know we're constantly getting better, right? And sometimes that's polishing, sometimes that's complete overhauls. But I do think that's a really interesting aspect when we talk about what must be different. And as we go into this next exercise of kind of priority focus, I'm going to keep in mind that rate of change. Right. And I would think when we start talking about some of those focus areas, an element to add to our conversation pretty soon is what rate of change when you say it's topic specific.
Right.
Well, is there a topic that you're like, hey, this rate of change is a 10? This rate of change is a 5, and this rate of change is an 8, because that helps us kind of know, okay, this one's taking priority, right? Or this one's still important, but this one's still gotta take priority more. Like when I think about busing and master facilities. They don't go hand in hand, but they're coupled, right? Because if you change master facilities, you change busing, right? And so there's a little bit of like how they impact each other.
Glad you said priority, because speed
Mhm.
is how many priorities do we have?
Yeah,
If you have one priority,
Yeah.
it's probably gonna be a slower pace. We're used to 15, and so by that, then it's a different pace.
And if that becomes a 10, that priority, because you can address, focus and everything gets slowed down when you got 15, because you don't have the
Well,
bandwidth to.
it's that, and I'm gonna put it in a curriculum world, right? It's breadth versus depth. Right? I mean, you can do a lot of things, but you don't get like down in there, or you can do a couple of things and you can do them really, really, really well. Right? And I think about that a lot. We're definitely gonna talk about FOCA here in a minute. But I also think about that in terms of like strategic planning, right? You want a strategic plan that allows you both breadth and depth. Because there are things you really want to do well, like I'm gonna think student opportunities, right? Or destination district things, curriculum wise things that can move that needle. But you also want to make sure that as you drive kind of everyday decisions, that they fit into that strategic plan as well. So there's flexibility and nuance in there. So you're not just, well, that doesn't fit, that doesn't fit, that doesn't fit. All right, so cognizant of just kind of our natural agenda here, we're gonna take about a 5-minute break. You need a coffee or a bathroom break, anything like that, and then we'll switch into our priority focus. Take about 5.
Get a coffee.
Weird.
I'm gonna
I
get a
was
coffee.
looking at
and a
that.
coffee.
I'm usually not due for my restroom run for another hour.
I know.
Hour and 5.
I think there's a thing out there, like in the lobby, like a thing that you got. That sounds great. Very thingy. Very thingy. These was like this.
Yeah, not-
Good, I just wanted to make sure one of us had it to for breakfast. These are the top things.
Yeah, I tried to group them,
Oh, good, good.
and I deleted out a lot of trash, like,
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
and it actually triggered me on the thing. Does the LSSA take a shot? I sat there and in my email, I should have said, okay, we haven't listed them yet, because we've obviously paid the coalition,
Right,
and they were supposed to pay half.
they were. 100% they were.
But like, things like the,
I'll let you, well, you don't have to know right now, I'll put you down.
We don't use that.
We can do that. Okay. We'll break, little sustenance. I'm just gonna make Julie again for the delicious coffee cake. I've never had the famous coffee cake, but now I understand why it is famous, for sure. It's delicious. And it's bread, so it's healthy.
That's right.
Yeah, it's got dairy and egg, protein and all kinds of good stuff. So drawing your attention to your folder from yesterday, you should see a sheet that says why this matters. Just go behind that first, okay? You're gonna use that handout in just a second. But I want to draw your attention to, you'll see goals, which is the superintendent's goals and the treasurer's goals. There's 3 pages here. One is, this one, looks like a chart. Then there's the narrative version, which are mine, so these 2 are mine, depending on which format you like,
One pager,
right? And then Adams is the chart, okay?
literal.
So these are
small font.
these are literally the same. It just depends on whatever format you like it. I tend to gravitate towards the narrative one. Imagine that. Okay. But before we kind of delve into priorities, or activity, I thought this would be helpful, and Doug made the suggestion, and I think it's a good suggestion too. And I'll circle back with Ben to make sure he's aware. These are the goals for Adam and I for this year. So these are our kind of priorities or our focus for the year that we discussed and reviewed at the beginning of the year. Normally, we do this in around kind of July, August kind of time frame. I would say we start drafting them probably in June-esque. And then in July, we normally kind of present at least a draft of them, get some feedback, and so that we can start the year. And again, as soon as we have a draft, we start kind of looking at those, or I can speak for me, I won't speak for Adam. When I start to build my goals, I also show those to our principals, right? Because we all should be working towards the same goals, right? We shouldn't be having 23 principals have 3 and 4 goals each that are different than mine. And so we all should be working towards the collective. Now, it doesn't mean their action steps aren't different on how to get there, right? But certainly we all want that kind of that unifying piece. One thing also we'll go in these in depth, but the yellow highlight on mine, I just think it's easy to see here. And I think it's the red on Adams maybe. Those are the common things that Adam and I have in common, the things that are kind of collective for us. Like the strategic plan, the levy pieces, those kind of things. So Adam, you want to start with yours and then I'll kind of give an overview of mine, give an overview of your goal.
Yeah. So the first section, mine's broken into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections. Actually on mine, the red sections was the add-ons, because this has been an evolving list. We've kind of added on to it year over year. A lot of these things naturally come through with the normal cadence. So we've made it past the forecast development we're working on now. We'll have that come back through on the top section. Audits done with, organizational manuals, that's kind of an ongoing. Then when we get down to the communication, we actually did have a takeaway on financial manuals review with the organizations. We just had that this past week. And we're going to have a Jessica's going to come in and we're going to work through getting some of the things that they said they wanted. What appeared to happen after having a review with them is maybe the draft that we had in Google somehow got separated from the draft that a lot of comments had went into. So we're going to build back from the beginning out on that, and then we'll get that put through. But communication, just keeping everybody in the loop. I don't feel like I'm explaining this the right way, so I'm just going to go kind of a higher overarching, and then we can drill in anywhere that's necessary. But so the accountability sections basically to keep everybody, you guys all in the loop on where we're at. And these are some bigger level things. Then with the communication, that's keeping the community really, not just the board, but keeping the community in the loop on where we're at. A lot of these are revolving around public facing documents that we have. They go out. A few things are just in with board, like on the updates. And then the fiscal responsibility, we did add this year the long-term financial plan. That is around a lot of the changes that we're experiencing. We did have a kind of a roadmap in a way of how we could try to, if that was the plan, to avoid an operating levy in the future. We've had some changes come down from Columbus that have now made some of those theoretical ways to get there, maybe a little more challenging. So to give a longer term, it is not going to be very accurate. I mean, that's just something that we know because a lot of things change. But it's to be helpful where we can plug in more of those legislative impact things on a longer timeline so that everybody can see how these things will shift kind of today's plans as we go forward. Meetings with the superintendent, that was an add-in, that was a way for us to really kind of dive deeper into some things that maybe we talked about board meetings, executive team meetings, one-offs that pop up. Kind of, I think more of a central office planning. Most of these things are really kind of planned.
Is that going well?
Yeah, I think so. We've had to have some changes at times just
Yeah.
because of life happening, but
Yeah.
we had a good talk and we're prioritizing, making sure that we have those, because that's what helps us all calibrate, make sure we're meeting everybody's needs. And then the reflection, I just added that in because it was a way to slow things down a little bit. And I think that had helped a lot. That had helped a lot that was more in my office planning, more so than anything. So that I could take the time to step back a little bit and better serve what the needs of the team was, to kind of keep everybody from, I don't want everybody losing it all at once, and that was the goal there.
I think that, that reflection piece is very solid. In the national conference that I was just in, there was a lot about, I didn't really attend a lot of them, but there were a lot of sessions about well-being and health and reflection, taking care of yourself to take care of others. In one of the sessions, the average leadership in a central, speaking of treasurers and superintendents, the average has now dropped in an urban school. The average superintendent is 1.8 years. And in a suburban or kind of like our area, it's 2.3. At one point, that number was as high as 5. So when we talk about sustained leadership, when you couple that with the data that we just talked about, like, those are very real dichotomies. We're going to have that short amount of change. I mean, I say treasurers, I could say they're in the same boat. You know what I mean?
We don't do a great job of, and we have some really good people in central office that do a good job of reminding us of this. We don't do a very good job of stopping and smelling the roses.
Right.
It's just next obstacle to the next obstacle to the next obstacle. And so I think some of that has helped with just taking the breath to say, we have come along. We have done some good. We've made a positive impact. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Those weekly meetings that Adam, I think, are also a good time for us to kind of step back and focus on the big. Because when you're in your day to day, you're like, there's a fire and there's this issue and there's this issue, not literal fire, but there's a little, right? There's the thing that pops up. It's a good time for us to say, nope, we're gonna kind of put that over to the side and try to focus on like the bigger picture of things. Any questions for Adam on those pieces? I just got a text from Ben. He should have an estimated arrival at that.
Oh,
Yeah,
Cool.
so I'll pull up a chair for just a second. So my goals, the first one really is about, kind of that culture work, that we started last year. I think you'll see that the biggest piece there is a strategic plan. Actually going to launch that, when I say launch, like launch the planning and the directions, not that it's finished, right? I'm probably gonna do that in about March. Have a good planning call the next couple of weeks with that. And really our goal would be to kind of build it, get all the community input, all the gathering through around May or June, then polish that up and have that really finesse so that we can launch the 26-27 school year with a new strategic plan. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity. And that timing will really work because I think of them like Betsy, making sure that we think about the rollout of that, making sure that we have, like I think our print budget, like accordingly, like when you have a new strategic plan, you gotta build that into publication of that, right? And I also think what a wonderful opportunity is convocation, like just new, right? New staff orientation, gosh, what an awesome opportunity to launch that there. So you have the strategic plan, certainly the big umbrella, but then underneath that, some of us in the room with some other staff members, had some really robust work around our culture blueprint. It is super close. I actually met with Corey Miller, when I was down in Nashville, about some of just the finesses of the aesthetics that still need a little bit perfecting. And so he's working on that. So that will, have a rollout this spring as well to couple with the long-term strategic plan. And then, as you know, we've been doing a lot of work with R Factor, a lot of work with our principals in our monthly meetings and our assistant principals and principals that meetings that Aaron have with those separately. But you can definitely tell that vocabulary and that vernacular is starting to pick up, like people use it, they're speaking it. And Derek, Averett said, it has to live through you before it can, or it has to live within you before it can live through you. And so I think we're seeing some good traction around that. Then the second goal is around improving instruction. And there are a lot of different buckets there, right? There's student achievement. So we're always looking to increase that. Again, that goal is 5 stars. Gifted and ELL. If you remember, we have 2 new staff members in there, a new director of gifted, a new director of ELL. And to be completely honest, more on the gifted side than ELL. Gifted is undergoing, talk about ready to change, undergoing a pretty extensive overhaul. Like I said, getting staff in the right spot, making sure we're maintaining the gifted laws, making sure that we just really have a plan that makes sense, K through 12, and utilizing staffing in the best, most appropriate way. ELL, not quite as a complete overhaul, but if you think about, we have approximately 1,900 ELL students. We have 1,900 special education students, and we didn't have a director of ELL. I mean, that's kind of like a little bit mind-boggling, right? And so really making sure she's done a lot. I will commend Kristen. Kristen really likes to live it, to see what she's asking people to experience. So she has really done some lifts around data to say, whoa, let me take that off the teacher's hands so the teacher can teach and the teacher can intervene and the teacher can work directly with kids, meaning our CLL like specialists. And she's handling a lot of that data piece. Now, we've also talked about, when I say we, Lori and myself, have talked with her about, is that sustainable? Right. Can you do that completely? But I think she wanted to experience what the teacher was experiencing to really say like, we're taking a lot of instructional time away. We got to figure out that data piece.
We saw that in the committee conversations last year.
100%. That's where we got this.
How many teachers were doing, for lack of a better word, admin or.
Like data work.
Data
Like
work.
instead of being with kids
They
and
could
instructing kids.
Yeah.
So that one's proving super helpful. TBTs, K6, those have been introduced. Those are being really sick. Those are showing some really good results. Sorry, teacher-based teams, sorry, not acronyms, teacher-based teams. Kind of when you say, these are not new, okay, teacher-based teams have been around for like 20 years, but a teacher-based team is really, think of it like, you have a group of teachers that have kids, they come together to review data, and then they talk about the interventions that are needed for that. Data dialogue can feel very personal for teachers, particularly like when you get into kind of smaller teams of 2 or 3 people, 4 people, 7 people. If somebody's not doing as well or their data is showing different, there's always the excuse of, well, it's the demographic breakdown of the class. No, not always. Sometimes it is instructional strategies, sometimes it's the pacing. They're having some really good conversations, and I think it was good implementation of TBTs after our curriculum adoption. Right, we got that order right, curriculum adoption happened first, then you introduce the TBTs, because introducing those together, then it just would have been too overwhelming for people. So showing some really good success with that. We actually gave a survey on the November PD date. Really, really promising that people feel like those are beneficial, that they're seeing how to use that. I think they're always kind of looking at more tools in their tool belts for instructional strategies, so building some more PD around that. But they value the time to look at the data with students in our MTSS team and curriculum department. Kudos to them. They do a lot of work behind the scenes to make that data very manageable for our teachers. When you talk about just resources, a lot of districts don't have that. They give teachers just raw data and say, go figure it out. Our teachers get really beautiful data that has been kind of grouped and cleaned up and organized so that they can better make sense of it. Junior high model, as you know, we have a targeted intervention model in ELA and math. We are currently looking at the success of that to see if we will continue to replicate that in science and in social studies. We talk about accountability. these are really good conversations. I think when we are going to invest in staff, you have to show that the results are producing. You have to look at the data. And so I had a principal ask me the other day, are we still on par to hire that social studies and science, the 2-year role, what would be next year, and the next year I was got this forecast, and I said, all depends on the data. And I think my response caught her a little bit off guard. I said, they are forecasted and they're there for the planning. If the data doesn't produce, we're not hiring those. And so I think that got back to teams to say like, hey, we gotta make sure that our data is showing that this is successful. And then you'll be seeing actually in February, curriculum adoption for science. Curriculum in our district is a huge investment, and so we've done some pilot work with science, and we'll be ready to make that textbook adoption presentation to you in February board meeting. Third goal is really about systems. That's how I'll incorporate it. This has really been a lot of work through different departments, but particularly around our principals and assistant principals, around these developing systems and being able to replicate those systems. Yesterday Doug talked about scale and size. We have to make sure that our buildings can replicate things consistently. So we now have a hiring funnel that HR has developed, and all of our principals and assistant principals have been kind of trained or PD'd on as we go into hiring season. We have one of those for LEA. We have one for LEA, LSSA, admin, and then we're developing one for hard to fill. So hard to fill would be like special education, intervention specialist. If we ever had a Latin teacher leave, I'll be honest, the high school principal can kind of follow that bucket at this point. We also have done a lot of system work, and we're not done. I mean, we're in kind of mid-year. By the end of the year, start next year, I'd like us to have an evaluation handbook. They are definitely certainly following OTES, but we need a little bit more, we need some of the nuances of that squared away, less autonomy in that, because I think teachers, particularly our traveling teachers, feel a certain way and things, just little bitty things look different from building to building and otherwise like that. We've done a lot of work with subs, making the process follow long-term subs. We've done a lot for attendance. Even Lance had to come in and kind of train on attendance and make sure we were doing some pieces there. So just a lot of systems work. I mean, I'll have a list of those for you at the end of the year to make sure that you can see the breadth of that work, but making sure that I think not that we didn't have systems, we certainly have systems. But making sure that those systems are written down because of the transition of people. Sometimes those are in people's head, and that doesn't help you when you have 23 principals going, well, that person's not here anymore, or I'm not in that person's head, so I don't know what that looks like. We have principal meetings and assistant principal meeting. Aaron and I do together, and then he breaks off of that. So that's more of the big umbrella that he breaks off and meets with K6 and 7-12 principals separately, and they get some more depth. So we're doing a lot of calibration right now on discipline. A lot of good conversations. Well, messy, but good conversations. And the reason those have become important is K6 discipline, really K2 discipline, looks really different, as you can imagine, than high school discipline, right? And so also by the end of the year, we will be having student handbooks for all grade bands. We have a code of conduct, and sometimes we reference the code of conduct like the student handbook. The code of conduct lives within the student handbook, but a code of conduct is not just the student handbook. We have K6 handbook.
I was just gonna say, I thought we had.
We don't really have 7-12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do have K6, but we don't have 7-12. And think of it like a one-stop shop for families and kids, and like, again, this is the problem, different buildings have different things, right? So making sure that we replicate that and envision what we've talked about in K6 and 7-12 is like attendance is attendance. Attendance is at K6 and 7-12, it's attendance, right? So you would have basically these huge portions of the handbook that would be the same district-wide, and then you would have almost like K2 uniqueness, K6 uniqueness, 7-12 uniqueness, just portions of the handbook that would be unique to the grade thing. And I would say those are smaller portions than not. But again, a lot of rules or it's not really policy, procedures or processes, they're the same no matter what, right? The code of conduct is what it is, and the discipline in K6 is 7-12. So we're working on those kind of. Any questions with my goals?
Yes, I mean, again, I feel like not literal, but it seems like there are often fires popping up that I'm sure take you away from the work that you wish you were doing and the visioning work that the two of you, you know, and you two are gonna do individually. Do you feel like, how is that balance feeling at this point?
Go first, go ahead, you want to go?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. I reflect on that a lot, really, particularly when I'm at a conference, I probably have more time to reflect on that than not. I view the superintendent role, you gotta be on the balcony a lot, right? You're not in the weeds, you're in the balcony. I would say right now, I'm a little bit more in the weeds than I probably wanna be or should be, but I understand also. Again, walking in and kind of the history that we were walking into, I kind of knew that, right? And I can see it stabilizing, I can. You know, we got, some good staff in place, we've got some systems that are starting to be developed, you can feel that breath coming. So I would say by the time we get to the end of this year, it'll be probably a bit more appropriate balance. But I'm also trying to be more deliberate of planning those, kind of like to Adam's point, I'm trying to plan those, right? So I think it's like March 6th, I don't know, I think it's March 6th. I have I think on my calendar, it says dreaming, right? So it is that visioning, like, not just strategic planning, that's not what I'm just talking about, like dreaming, doing research, looking at high performing, like, just really immersing yourself in those kind of places. Also, my sleep is a little off sometimes, so I do a lot of that in the evening too, when it's really quiet in my house, and that helps me. Like yesterday, I was working on something and I said, Dad, I should be gonna have to go upstairs, you're noisy, I can't concentrate, she's looking at that. Why don't you just put your earbuds in, like, cause that's noise, like, that doesn't help me. So just trying to find that quiet and being deliberate in that schedule. But I can definitely see some of the systems that we're building are helping that.
Do you feel like you are able to do more? Like the superintendent conference, more state and national FAFSA women in leadership,
I
are you
think-
able to get
Yeah,
more?
I think we'll see the full fruition of that next year, but yes, I'm able to, you don't really step away, but you're able to kind of divert and keep pulse up, but yes. Women's
Basically.
conference, FAFSA, yeah, like there, I was able to kind of, I mean, even though we had a lot going on last week in the district, I was still able to be where I needed to be and get some of that, that was happening, yeah.
Yeah, I think those are good points. You know, Dr. Whiteley being new in the position, we've had shifting in the support staff that she has, getting that stability. I think as that continues, then that allows for more of the planning to take place on the joint side. You know, right now it's more of a don't forget this or don't forget that with staffing and things that we're adding in the forecast, but you know, longer term.
You feel like it's better, it's more of a, I'm gonna use partnership, I don't know if that's the right word. You're more cohesive, living in the house together
Oh, yeah.
than
Yeah,
in
there's
the
no
side of the house, that's not.
No, yeah, there's no,
You're more,
it's just,
you're back together, you're no longer separated.
she's heard me talk about her calendar many times.
Yeah.
But we had a focus meeting once where, hey, we gotta have these.
Right.
These have to happen, and so since we've had that, then I think that's helped prioritizing and focusing on that too, so that I can help. So she's helping me help her. I think would be a good way to put it.
So any other questions on goals? We decided it would be helpful for you to know kind of our priorities this year, right? Because we had just kind of talked about priorities, even though it's like writing post-it notes, right? So kind of pulling out this handout. Okay, we're gonna kind of go kind of through this exercise as well. I would also get your PowerPoint out if you don't have it, just because we don't have the screen up here. So I wanted to think about, I think Adam, you said it about the eggs in the basket, right? And our rate of change. You gotta be cognizant of how many eggs are in the basket at a given time, right? I feel like old leadership adage, and this is a good thing that this has changed, but I remember when I first became an administrator, if you would have said, my plate is full, somebody would have said, get a platter or eat faster. Right? That was kind of the leadership adage. I think we've learned from that there is capacity. There's capacity of people, there's capacity of organizations, there's burnout, right? And so I think really having those priorities. Now, this is kind of looking forward, particularly as we're kind of in the springtime of reevaluating and looking forward to like 26, 27. This will help Adam and I, and it will help us as a group, I think. So it's not about solving everything. This exercise is not about that. It's about kind of trying to find agreement about what matters most and how we might have to, not say something is not important, but maybe say, hey, remember we talked about, these are our big buckets, right? On that slide that you see there at the very bottom, I think it's a powerful quote. It says, priorities are what you say no to, not what you say yes to. Because you can say yes to everything, right? Sometimes it takes a lot to say, that doesn't really match with the strategic plan, or, that's not really the priority now, I'm gonna put that on a list. People here, you're saying it's not important. No, I'm saying I need to give my time and attention to kind of these buckets. Not saying it's not important, but we just need to pause for a minute and come back to that. So I want you to think about on this sheet right here, this guiding question, this is kind of your individual space. I want you to think about these focus menus. I gave you a focus menu here. Okay, just so you weren't starting from scratch and we were all using the kind of the same vocabulary. Looking at these lists, jot down the 3 focus areas that are most important to you. Now, these are very broad on purpose, right? But you have student learning and achievement, student well-being, fiscal stewardship, staff recruitment and retention, culture and climate, equity and access, innovation and future readiness, facilities and infrastructure, community trust and engagement, and governance excellence. Write down the 3, not 5, not 6. Now, I guess you could have 2 or 1. You want to put all your eggs in the basket, right? But no more than 3 in this little space right here. Think of the question, if we're proud of this board in 3 years, what will we have consistently focused on? And again, views from this list, because I want us to have the same vocabulary. We'll have good, rich discussions, but I want us to have the same vocabulary. If we're viewing this board as successful in 3 years, what would be our focus area? Again, there are no wrong answers. Don't worry, we will have time to explain it from the city, because some of these are big.
About 19.
You're like, Adam, we told that very straight face, I'm gonna have to do, is that true? Sometimes he'll look at you and tell you a big old tale, I'm like, is that true? And then he'll like 5 hours later, I wasn't true.
I should have done research that.
It's just close enough that it's
No.
believable.
Correct.
It's gotta be something a little off. Corduroy.
Okay. I want us to get in pairs. We can do this just at our tables, just because we're spread out, we don't have an odd group number. I want us to discuss, okay? Discuss these, maybe you have all the same. Maybe you don't, okay? Discuss, and then be able to explain to the group, again, you're not trying to reach consensus yet, but be able to explain to the group, why they matter. Like why they matter to you, why you pick those kind of rationale, and kind of see what you have to talk. So talk to your partner, and then we'll come back together.
Hey, what?
Okay.
So like this way with you.
So you didn't.
It's a different one, yeah.
So you get a.
Okay, so I know, student lead and learning achievement. So stewardship. Staff.
The one on the graph I sent you was culture and climate.
Student achievement.
I think culture and climate.
I think that has to be orthodox. And I feel like we have good.
And then-
like, but you
Unless
can't
you
use
have
the-
strong.
I said, I'll put field
Yeah,
like.
and if it ever.
So I just like-
Culture and climate and environment design.
Yeah.
And
And I had facilities and structure and communities.
I had
Yeah.
fiscal stewardship.
I feel like if we don't get this. Here.
Challenges. Like,
I just-
facilities is part of that.
We don't give them, leave us.
Change it, and then go on and- yeah. Yeah.
I mean, everybody's able to, Ohio, so that's gonna be navigating.
And then you just have this one, because that's where you go as we learn
Yeah.
to call.
If.
You know, this.
That's all of the dollars. We're saying, I'm in really like the
Yeah.
government side. Process being.
Yeah.
So this tweak, so it's perfect. There's nice stuff. Where you can pay our options. We can become very tired. It's not very sensible.
Yeah.
Retirement or the change of retirement age.
We put.
Yeah, I was probably.
One person on the.
They're saying. But the only the retirees, but it's. Teacher, leader, tutors and.
Right.
And it's like.
Yeah, and all the buildings, my kids are. Oh, yeah, this is nice, but you've always heard. Get the run list.
Yeah, and then. Maybe we also get a sense that it's a last night, so we're to the next generation. Or maybe they're just working on the coach, maybe, that's where it's, we need to make sure we got them coming in, so make sure we keep them, make sure that we've got the next of these people. That's what we said, take the options, we were, because we're gonna suck all these things, slow down.
Yeah, we call it a process, I call the, you know.
So it's the.
I don't know.
So it would be great if we could, in 3 years, not be worried about this at all. It's like, let's get this figured out and put it behind us, and maybe that's impossible, but
Just.
Like,
at least. Yeah, be making progress. You've been around
Yeah.
a lot of them, and you can see
We're just.
conversations and we
Board.
for so long, we were just installed, so. I think we need to move that forward somehow, and I feel like the community trust engagement
Right, they have to all follow.
is kind of like
somehow.
the staff improvement and stuff like that. If you have that figured out, it makes a lot of other things that are, we're on the focus menu.
Some of these.
It makes them easier because you can get people on board when you're
Do I understand?
whatever, it is, when you're dealing with all of these physical challenges. Or whenever, all this. Feel like, get people on board, that we're all rowing in the direction, or we can at least get by and
Stretch the dollar, maximize that.
rise those challenges.
That's where I trust in 5 years, how much of
The
it.
money to fund it, like, it is the foundation on which everything is built, because you don't want to do all these things, but it's just a way to, whether you're creatively or actually fund it, it's not a huge.
Yeah.
I can want all the things, but, yeah.
Years, you know. And some of that.
One
It's something.
question that I have, I don't know if I have to answer, is like, Which of these things make more sense to me, work focuses versus what makes more sense for the staff to run with, you know? And I'm still figuring that out, so I don't have the answer, this would be my guess right now, but I was like, get into it, maybe I'll be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they were still learning achievement.
Yeah.
Because they would show the check.
It's like a loss.
We all good? All right.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, Kelly and I, we got lucky, we picked the same things, right? So, Kelly, why don't you share what we picked?
In no particular order, but student learning and achievement, facilities and infrastructure, and community trust and engagement. And which obviously we all want to focus on learning and achievement, but for us, what we said is if we don't get the community trust engagement, we aren't going to be able to. We need community and trust and engagement to be able to make sure we have the facilities and infrastructure that we need for our students. And student learning engagement, like we need them to understand, you look at how kind of checkbook and you paid, I don't know, making up a price, $1.2 million for adoption of science textbook. Making that up.
Times 5.
But you know, why these things are important for our students, we have to get to the point where they believe and trust that the people making the decision have that.
One of the ones that I kind of grappled not being in the top three, but I kind of think I just encapsulated it into community trust and engagement was culture and climate. But if your culture and climate is right and ready, you have the engagement, right? Or vice versa. And I also think culture and climate goes into student learning and achievement, you know, when the children feel safe and they feel engaged and they feel stretched. And they feel like they have the adult that they can absolutely feel valued, that's when you see that student, right? Okay, Doug and Al, what did you have? Did you have different, did you have the same?
So we had different, mine actually matched your guys's, so.
Okay.
But. And, I mean, I'll say the one we had in common was the student learning and achievement, and. I mean, I think it's one of those things that. I feel like we've got. Good. Kind of infrastructure in place for that, and we're making good progress, but you can't take your focus on it, I mean, that's. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we all say it's our North Star, so it's the our focus. I had fiscal, well, and on that, I saw some of the choices like leveraging internet. So when you guys had facilities and infrastructure, I feel that the facilities and infrastructure discussion should feel student achievement. And so I see that as being part of a subsection of that from a focus standpoint.
So what was the other one we had student learning?
And then I had fiscal stewardship, and that is just reflective of the fact that where we are financially, the challenging landscape that we have in Ohio as far as school funding and the changes that are happening quick and fast. You know, we had a change on the inside village last year that cost us $3 million. You know, and I think it's tough to track that. And we need to have as much flexibility and make sure that we're as set as possible there. And then I had staff recruitment, retention, and development. And as I was wrestling with them, I think there's a lot like, you know, culture and all that stuff. I think we've made a lot of inroads there. What I am seeing is the number of retirees that we had last year due to the changes in the retirement age. And then we had a lot this year as well, as of course we're trending. And when I talk with principals and administrators at schools, when I happen to be in there, they are talking about it's not just the number of retirees, it's who is retiring. It's those 3, 4, 5 key team leaders that have propelled that. And they never mention, oh, and then here's who's taking that place. And so I had a little addition on there of adding development as well, because we have to keep them, but we have to bring them in, we have to keep them. We also need to develop those next leaders that are getting ready to walk out our doors.
We've never done a good job of pipeline.
You know, I think. This one's an interesting one just in education, right? You've really, I mean, education, folks going into education, folks graduating with an education degree. And those are just really, really different data points. And then when you add kind of diverse candidates in that becomes a whole even more complicated discussion because I think it was 4 years ago. About 4 years ago, And this, if you know, we were, there was a regional council in Southwest Ohio looking at these, licensures and different things. And at one time, there was one, person in the state of Ohio, with an Asian demographic that had a teaching. One. Right? About 6 years ago, I was looking for a physics teacher. I literally called every university in Kentucky and every university in Ohio, and there was 3 physics majors that had a teaching class. And there were physics majors, but they didn't have teaching class, right? And that's real, right? I mean, just that pipeline of people is very, very different. And then I think, like you said, sometimes you get people there, but they don't stay, right? And there's really interesting engagement data of why people don't feel, there's a cultural element there, they don't feel valued, they don't feel seen, they don't feel developed, right? PD is a huge piece of that, and having been in a big district and a small district, I would say the amount of opportunities and relative resources that our teachers receive at PD is pretty phenomenal. Now, when you haven't been in another district, you might not realize that, and that is a big, very, very drastic different experience from a big district to a small district, is just the amount of PD and diversity and growth that you can obtain in-house and outside, of course, but that's an interesting piece.
I think we're handcuffed a little bit too on those by the state. I mean, they went to that, I don't know if they still do, but they went to that a few years ago where you were so, your license, I mean, my license was K-8.
Yeah. It was so restricted.
They're so restricted, like you can teach K2 reading,
Yeah.
and that's all. Well, I mean, yeah, you gotta.
Yeah, that they've at least opened
They
that.
have, they opened that up,
to help us, yeah. Okay, so right now we have student learning, community trust and engagement, facility, fiscal stewardship, and staff recruitment and retention. Those are kind of buckets we've heard. Okay, Abby, Julie?
So, I had chosen student learning and achievement, innovation, and future readiness, and community trust and engagement. Again, I wrestled with the fiscal stewardship, but felt like we were not going to achieve community trust and engagement without strong fiscal stewardship, so I put that as a subset. But then Adam made a very compelling argument of governance excellence. And that should we have governance excellence, that the rest would all fall in line under that with he had number 2, community trust and engagement. And I think that does make sense. Because if we do have governance excellence, then we can achieve all of the other aspects that are important.
We talked about that one too, and we kind of collapsed it into that kind of community trust and engagement. If we're engaging and we're trusting each other, and people see us trusting each other, then.
From what we did in the fall, I kind of viewed that as the only one that was separate, you know, I'm viewing the governance more as policy, more of that direction. And then that's kind of the thing that would steer us. Then the community trust and engagement, as we learned, the board has a lot more flexibility there.
Right.
And the way they can illustrate why we are trustworthy people than what we experience would fall of not with facts, so. And the fiscal stewardship, that's what I told Julie, it's like we hear that a lot, but the Lord, that's like the air around the pillars that we have. I mean, it's like everything we talk about here is engaged in trying to stretch that.
You know, that'll be an interesting one when we talk about strategic planning. Because there are some people having gone through strategic planning in different places. There are some people who are like, well, that's just the fabric of who you are. Like, you have to have fiscal responsibility, you don't have to put it on the strategic plan, it's just like an underpin, right? But if you think of a strategic plan as your North Star, that you're driving decisions towards, and you don't have it on there, it's very easy to kind of out of sight, out of mind. It shouldn't be. But if it's not there and you can't say, hey, we want to do this, but it's not a fiscally responsible decision, it gives you an opportunity, if it's pinpointed on your strategic plan, to remind people, this is our focus, it's who we are. Every decision is being guided kind of through that pillar or through that strategy. But it's interesting, some strategic plans do not have fiscal responsibility on it, and they'll kind of give a little caveat, you know, like a little asterisk at the bottom, like, it's always there, right? But it can become out of whack if you don't write it down, you're not prioritizing it, right? It's not part of that natural speech. Okay, so right now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7, so we've cut it down, right? We cut it down, but going back to our morning activities, right? 7 people, not individuals, governance team. If we had to, and look, I even left this room for 4. And I really wanted to put 3, but sometimes, if we had to pick from those, and I'm even gonna stretch this a little bit more, prioritize those. One is the most important. And again, I'm also thinking of our governance team, but also Adam and I, right, as we think about our goals, we think about our work for next year. It's really helping us prioritize our focus, thinking about what we said we wanted to do in the future. What order would we put those in?
Well, first we have to get to 4, right?
You have to get to 4,
How
and
many
then you have to set. So you have student learning, community trust and engagement, facilities, fiscal responsibility, staff recruitment, innovation and future readiness, and governance excellence.
I heard pretty consistent on student learning and achievement.
Okay, so that, yeah,
I think that's number
That
one.
has to be number 1.
okay,
And community and trust and engagement, I think is the one that I.
okay.
I didn't have-
Oh,
I didn't
sorry.
care about those.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I thought everyone had that.
Every group had it, yeah.
So I heard student learning, and I even heard that it's 1, got to be number 1, okay?
And then community trust and engagement.
Is that 2, or are we just, right now, we're just getting the 4 maybe? So I've got community trust and engagement, student learning, then what? We had facilities, fiscal responsibility, staff recruitment, innovation and future readiness, governance.
I mean, I didn't pick it, but I would say that governance excellence is critical to your point of the longevity of the governing board, the consistency, the having clear policies and procedures, but
Context,
even
in context.
even though I didn't pick it, I would make a case for it making the top.
So right now, we're just picking the 4. not
Right now, we're
picking
just picking the 4.
But again, you all can.
So I'm not advocating, just putting a thought out to the universe, number 1 thing that impacts student learning and achievement, number 1 thing.
It's 3/4 of our expenditures.
Data shows that, if you want to move the needle, find excellent staff. A child can recover from a poor teacher after 1 year. You cannot recover, you will never make up the difference if you have a weak teacher 2 years in a row, particularly in reading. If you have a weak teacher 2 years in a row, the gap will always exist. Doesn't mean you can't shorten the gap, but the gap will always exist.
That's very true.
I'm just putting it out there.
Well, and I think, a lot of times when we talk about our financial decisions, we're talking about the 25%. We're not talking about the 75%.
Well, and 80% of our budget is staff. Right? So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not advocating. I'm just throwing nuggets.
Then I'm gonna shift a little bit to into that point of. How can the governing board enhance staff recruitment retention? They can. Besides superintendent treasurer, that's,
Well,
hired people, but we.
Well, and I'm,
yeah, how can they
Right.
get the value into that bucket?
when I'm thinking about our past. Governance excellence can either be a draw or it can, and it's not excellent, it can be a deterrent. Right? I remember. In my listening sessions, 500 listening sessions, it became very clear from the community voice, not the staff, but the community voice. That amongst the turmoil at the top. The staff were still able to get the job done, like this distraction. Didn't dip all the way through the organization, the organization was able to keep functioning despite the odds. We didn't hear that a lot. I heard it very, very clearly from our community.
Succeeded despite us not doing this.
Right. But interestingly, so flipping that, think about. What would that have looked like if it had been healthy, functional, trust engaging, like, you don't know, but that's just a curious, like, what if, right?
Well, I think we saw the results. I mean, we saw when we dipped in our results, it may not have felt like a direct impact and people may have felt like it was still going forward, but I believe that we saw the change in our results because of Donna. adopting the curriculum, not spending the money on some investments in student achievement drivers. I believe that even maybe that was felt. I'm not sure that was the reality when you look at what happened to our results during the term that happened.
Well, there's the feelings and then there's the data, right? You can feel like you're still surviving.
And there was
Data might-
turmoil after turmoil after turmoil. And now I think. It's like derail us a little as well.
So I've heard student learning, community trust and engagement. I heard a little bit for governance excellence. The same what I heard. Staff, I heard staff. Those are 4.
I struggle with governance excellence, not that I don't want it, I do, but I feel like, is it more important than some of these other things that would affect student learning and achievement? I'm not saying.
I think there's a case to be made. I think setting up the right governance to enable all these other things is an important role, especially for 5 out of 7 of us, right? And so we shouldn't be creating the culture, but we should be writing the governance that enables the culture to be developed. So
Clear
I
and
think
direct
it does
here.
focus on our job responsibility.
Precisely that frequency thing, to help you guys not have so much noise. Focusing in on that would help for us to be able to. I just remember there used to be board meetings where we'd have a member that would like. Read a policy out loud, like we're going to change policy. And I used to always, look back and say, what's in that policy? Because as I'm sitting there listening and going, okay, if the governing body chooses to put this in, now what steps am I going to need to take to get it from here over to our policy so that it's not lost? So that everybody knows this, no matter what happens to us.
I would be comfortable with rising student recruitment and retention governance, but. Those are the 2 that we discussed.
Yeah.
I want to have like a subset under each one.
No.
I know.
Because how can
You can't have a half cracked egg.
I know, like, how do you do student and learning achievement if you don't have the infrastructure and facilities to do it?
I do think there's some sense, like, I don't, I do, like, I believe it is, there are some.
But we're not allowed to have subsets.
Well, I think that shifts the drive of the.
Correct.
Now the drive of the facility is the student,
Well, and if you remember our
but
feedback,
versus the other way around.
if you heard our feedback, particularly in that after the levy, it was the money took over.
Yep.
Right, the money took over and I, in the feedback sessions after November. And I remember who said it, there were really only 2 people in the audience who said rigorous high quality or switched down. And I like, my heart hurt a little bit. My heart just, I'm like, oh, like. The focus is the student achievement, the student learning, how can the facilities complement that? And again, it wasn't even about the facilities, it was about the money, like, right, it wasn't even about the building and the innovation and the future ready, it was the money piece. So I think as we think about potentially going in November, how do you really create a narrative around student learning, student achievement, those kind of pieces?
So these are focus areas, we're not discarding the
Nope,
rest of
and
it.
this is not strategic planning.
Okay.
This is just saying, as we kind of think of our work together. Right, as we think of our work together, and we would have to, we don't wanna get a platter, we wanna have a plate, now we know sometimes we'll get a little extra side on the plate sometimes, but. We were putting our big buckets to say, hey, when you're thinking about your goals, when you're thinking about our work together, when we're thinking about our time together. Thinking, what I'm hearing is, when we've got 4 here, student learning, community trust and engagement, which I would say is. Very levy-esque, right, which ties in extra facilities, we can go down that rabbit hole, right? Staff recruitment and retention and governance excellence.
So now we have to rank them.
So in what order would you put those?
Again, I know I just made an argument for some and I'm gonna contradict myself in why. When the way you just described it of this is what we're working towards. I do worry a bit if we don't have innovation and future readiness on that plate. That we become. Complacent with the trying to polish and perfect what we have. Versus having that student learning and achievement be future focus.
And that's where I was gonna say, I kind of think of it as you're driving student learning, like there is that component, you have to be innovative, you have to be prepared for the future. Now, it could be flip-flopped, right? It's kind of chicken or the egg, but when I think of student learning, if you're not on your toes, looking forward, trying to increase your instructional strategies, trying to think about what are our 4E's and how we're preparing for that. There's no way you can divorce those, right? If you stay the same, you will draw.
Well, and I also think that also the facilities conversation too, you have to have the innovation and future. The chemistry table that you can move versus like stationary. We're gonna make we're gonna be swimming to the school.
It's really interesting, I didn't go through the session, but I read the handout. One of the handouts from the session. Innovation has become one of those very kind of polarizing words for people, right? It's almost that catch-all, like, I don't know what that means. Like, because everybody has a different definition. Like workforce readiness innovation is different than military readiness innovation, which is different than college. And so it's just really, really interesting. That word it's become so multifaceted that, and I think about that with strategic planning, right? You can put a lot of buzzwords in strategic planning, a lot of buzzwords, and people come around going, oh no, I've done all the time, right? And so I think about when we get to that part, those words really matter, and making sure people feel that they're authentic and not a buzzword, right? That's just really important because it can feel like kind of Ben Franklin's like adages, a little aphorism or solidified, and it doesn't say anything. I don't know what to do with that, right? And so I think a strategic plan has to be very future and broad enough to capture. But I think people are looking for that specificity to be able to drive those decisions through of what action am I supposed to take with that. So if you tell me to be innovative, and you can be innovative and then not change the achievement.
Well, you can be innovative, it doesn't mean technology. I think innovation also people immediately go to technology.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that you have to watch out for with innovation is sometimes if that's the primary focus, then you're moving at speed 10 and you're not getting that base, you're just all over the place. If you're chasing whatever the latest trend is, whether it's in teaching or technology or whatever. So I think it's super important and helps all these other things, but I think when it's the primary focus, it can be distracting almost. Yeah.
And what is innovative for each community is different. Right, it really is. I mean, you can make a decision that doesn't seem drastic in another community, and you make a decision in one community, like, what in the world? Like, this is so novel and new, and you're like, there's 25 people already did that, but it feels innovative to your community, right? I'm gonna pick on Mason, a couple years ago in our region, they were the first to kind of do away with battling staff. Now, across the country, that had happened in a lot of places, right? But it made the news, front page of the paper, like it was a thing because it was kind of the first time you'd seen it in Southwest Ohio. Whereas if you went to California, New York, things like that, they kind of paved that way years ago, right?
And look how many schools in
Have-
Southwest
yep.
follow.
All right.
All right, so I'm gonna recommend governance as number 2.
Okay, I'm gonna write it down. Doesn't mean set in stone. I don't have a pencil, but I can cross out even though it will like hurt. I can do that. Okay, governance. So it's student learning governance.
I would say that the governance piece and then the community and trust and engagement are two that if you get those right, then those can feed all of these other
Right,
things.
synergy.
Yeah, so
Maybe 3.
yeah, I feel like
Great.
those are all,
Well, if that's the case, then by default, staff becomes recruit, right? Which is interesting when you think about number 1, put a book in, right? Student learning and achievement. I'm gonna get the right people on the books. All right, or you gotta change your seat on the books, right? And then in the middle of that, so we're getting the right people to impact our kids, but at the same time, there's the huge guts. Right, think about ourselves, right? Our huge guts are governance, excellence, and community trust. Because if you have community trust, the staff will come. If you have governance excellence, the staff will come. Community trust, healthy, positive climate, culture, student learning. They feel like they have adults that care for them and matter, they have a community that supports them, and they have good leadership.
I might live 2 and 3, but nothing without dying my health.
I think community trust also leads to stability at this level. Yeah. Because you guys do represent the community.
All right, I think, and again, selfishly for Adam and I, this is just a good reminder, right? As we start to go into goal planning, we start to think of, and again, this is not. It's very easy to kind of couple strategic planning, like it's very easy to think about, this is our work, right? This is our work. A strategic plan, well, yes, it's our work, it's like the big 23 building work and how we're driving, it's a very external document, right? These are, I'm probably gonna make this into a pretty thing somehow, some way, so that we can like put it on your little placards or things. So,
You're back.
Right back here on our placard.
so Joe Sampolico, I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Yeah, I heard
wonderful,
him speak.
wonderful speaker. He used to be the superintendent of, like the cricket in, Minnesota. He lives across the, street from the K-12 school. First of all, he talks like a mile a minute, okay? You remember the micro machine man from the 80s? I mean, he literally said, I have 26 minutes, and I don't think he took a breath. But he jokes because you talked about your placard or your lanyards. He said when he became the new superintendent, they had quite a bit of transition. And he said, when I came in, he goes, when I accepted the job, he goes, I wasn't from Minnesota. He said, I knew, like, he goes, the light bulb went on of like, uh-oh. He goes, because they told me, number one, rent, you need to rent. Might not be here long enough to purchase a house, just rent. And he said the second thing, he goes, I came in, and he actually had a picture on, morning Ben, he had a picture like this, and they had masking tape. Yeah, a little tighter, yeah.
Yeah.
They had taken his, name tag and they had masking taped it on. They had just stuck his name with masking tape over the previous one.
Wow.
And he said, I was there for like 12 years. And he said, I'm like, on year 10, somebody goes, you want us to get you like ordering you a new one? He goes, no, don't jinx me now. Just replace the masking. Replace the masking tape. And he had a picture of it. And he said, when I left, he said, I took it with me because it was like yellow masking tape that was corroded and falling off. Right? But he's a wonderful speaker if you ever have the opportunity. He does
He's a ready thing.
he does walk to school videos, so he
Yeah.
lives about literally across the street. And so he'd walk to school and make a video every day. It was very,
He puts them all on, I think, Twitter's where I follow.
he also said, picture that I think of, he has 2 young children. And one day, the older child, they weren't in school yet, but the older child had tied the younger child to a tree outside of the building. And the teacher took a picture and said, how's your PBS? And he said, that's the beauty of having the school right outside your house. He was like, it was great. All right, so we have kind of 2 more sections, and this is definitely a shift, right? We've been really doing some big play, big dreaming, kind of some peaks and pieces, which I think are super helpful. And now we're gonna kind of get more into the day-to-day. Okay, so a little bit of a shift. So legal counsel, just to give a little background, and I'm gonna pass some data around that Adam was super helpful in pulling for this conversation, because I want to make sure we have that data in front of us.
You had a whole page. Mr. Thing, you had a whole page.
Listen, he likes the landscape. He likes the landscape. It's okay.
Magnifier.
What was funny, when I was speaking of landscape profiles, talking to Corey Miller about our culture blueprint. Yeah, and he goes, what don't you like? I said, I need to get a profile on the landscape. And he said,
Well, we did.
I like the landscape. I said, I know, but it looks like a PowerPoint file. I don't like that. And he was like, oh, I never thought about that. And then he goes, now I can't unsee it. I was like, and they showed me the one from, Both Series of yours is itself. I was like, it's profile. He goes, okay, touche.
From a
Yeah.
landscape.
I know, but yeah, so we're iterating on that.
All right.
Okay, legal counsel, a little bit of background here, some data. So as we mentioned yesterday, when I came in, when we were talking about our group norms, we have quite a bit of opportunity with legal firms, right? And it's very, very common for a Board of Education or a district to approve several legal firms, albeit you do 80 to 90% of business with one of them, all right? That's very common. But you have the others for second opinions, you have them for expertise. Certain people only do things with like bonds and facilities, certain groups are more like special ed heavy sometimes. So this data right here is our historical spending on legal firms. Okay? Just so you can kind of see that. You see the grand total and then you see it by year and then you see it by kind of group. Okay? Bricker and Graydon does a lot of the special ed world. And we're talking about transitioning from that. We were talking about that previously. But special ed and legal is a big, you just get into mediation, you get into facilitation, you get into advocates, you get into all of that, you get into lawsuits, all of that kind of good stuff. Recently we looked at our legal cases, that plays a role as well in getting expertise in that. But two thoughts. One is, let's start with kind of the smaller one, public records. Okay. Our public records are real. Like we get a lot of them. Okay. And I say that from, I had never experienced that. Adam had told me that, right? Adam had told me that. Adam had told me that, but literally I can think in a year, I don't know, we might have got 5. Right? It was super, super small.
You get 5 a day.
And so when Adam said like, oh, scale is real, right? I remember like my first year, I was like, whoa, okay. Now, and I'm looking at Adam for a little history here because I want to make sure I'm right. Prior to, what year prior did you handle public records? Like that they went through the treasurer?
Brody came in,
That's what, yeah.
Brody came in and did a presentation of some sort. And at the time, I believe he worked for Frost Brown Todd.
Yeah.
Correct?
We do.
And then Brody switched over to Ricker and Graydon and then that all came over there. That was back when.
It was 21, I think, when we went to public record for Brody doing it.
Okay, so that
I
was.
don't know exactly when, but I know what happened.
Okay.
I don't know the exact date. What happened was there was a suit about agendas at committee meetings.
Right.
That was pre-pandemic.
Right.
I can't say
Oh,
that,
that's
but
true.
I don't know exactly when that would have been, but it's been out for a while. And then after the suit, one of the things that has become more interesting since I've taken over as treasurer is the requests can be a little more internal heavy
Mhm.
of it could be easier to become biased. Let's go that route. Of it could be requests for information that's coming from text messages from individuals to individuals, stuff that could then be easier for the district to be somebody take it that we weren't clean, maybe take it as
Yeah, I get what you're
did
saying.
they because I just asked for Adam's text history and he's the one filling this. Did he then exclude that? And or now there's something that comes for Kelly's text. Now I go, oh Lord, now I have to ask Julie or Kelly or Ben or Doug or Alex for a personal information. These people are my boss. Yeah, like it's a really strange, like I never thought I would have seen it this way until what we've went through since I've been the treasurer of there's been a big level of keeping me from being the bad guy. And maybe if there is some pushback on no, we do need this, or some pushback on no, we do have to submit that. We don't want to put the district in a bad spot because of personal human error.
It's
We were on the road
Human
to
error.
appearance in any impropriety.
Yeah, it's easier for Brody to call us and say, hey,
Yes,
do you have any text messages that we
Yes.
need to screenshot than it is for you?
yes, it is.
I also think we've gotten a lot of public records requests that aren't public records. We've gotten a lot of informational requests. We do not provide information. We provide an actual existing public record. And I think that sometimes is confusing when Brody has to say there is no public record. Someone's like, well, you talked about it. But that doesn't mean there's a public record about it.
So with public records, kind of to Adam's point, I think most districts, or all, I wouldn't say most, majority, common practice is that the treasurer handles.
Yeah.
Right? However, that is until you experience some type of options, right? So for example, Brody will often say,
The 5% of what we
Right.
receive are completely easy for the treasurer to
Right.
handle, it's normal, we get.
correct.
The
But
95% that we get here that other places don't necessarily experience, and most places will get. I even asked Jenny about this at Sycamore, I think she had referenced maybe 15. It feels like a light year when we're getting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
15 in a year?
oh yeah,
yeah, we got like
yeah,
5.
you take a step out, to even a D, let's go divisions, because you know, a lot of people are like that by sports, you know, Sycamore being one. If you go down to like a D2 or less, they're getting the same 6 that everybody gets.
Right.
You know, we're requesting the data sample. And everybody in the state's
Well, we
getting
want
this.
your copy of your contract.
Right.
Very, very rare.
So,
The stuff we're getting is hotter than what normal people would be exposed to. Right.
so I think a couple things to that. One is some of the complexity of the public records that we receive, right? And making sure that you have a very clean way for somebody to go ask the needed information from whatever that individual. And the quantity, right? When we talk about, like over here, we said governance team, right, which includes Adam and I mean. Think about if Adam was filling all of those public records requests, right? I mean, just
Enough time.
the time it takes to do those. And some of those are very, like, to your point, they might not be hard, but they're laborious of just quantity, right? Like, Lori the other day was working on filling one, and it just had about 6 different components for 4 or 5 different pieces and was trying to compile that. So all of that said though, and we had talked a little bit about this last year, and we had chose to kind of pause on it. So right now, again, I don't want to speak for the group, but so I guess my first question is, are we comfortable with it not being, or do we like the idea that it's not the treasurer and that there is a kind of third party handling the public records?
I think it depends. I don't know. I've seen both ways. I think it depends on, you know, when you have a third party handle it, and I know that Adam spoke to this, I think yesterday, and we've talked about it, but there's a spreadsheet. But I feel like sometimes things get lost. Public records don't get filled in a timely manner because it just slipped through the cracks. Because to be honest, Brody's doing it, but we're not Brody's own client.
So, and I want to pause there, because you said something very important, timely.
Yeah.
How do you define timely? How we define it? Timely is relative,
Right.
right? So it's kind of like our 48-hour communication window that we have in board government. Some districts will look at you and go, like, that should be 72 hours. Or some people go, no, that should be 24 hours, right? Really, when you look at public records, it's it's within a reasonable
Right.
time. So the bigger the request,
The longer
that's longer it takes. The shorter the request, like if you're asking for one document, we should be able to produce that, right? So I do think though, some people, when it takes longer, even though it could be reasonable, they're getting a little antsy. Right? But I do hear you sometimes, we do have to, Adam particularly will be like, hey. Nudge, nudge.
And maybe we
Right up
define,
into the top.
maybe we define reasonable, because my reasonable amount of time is different than Doug's reasonable amount of time, it's
A
different than
good-
Julie's.
I think a good average that most people use is about
That's what I
about.
that's what I
30 days.
hear.
Now, if you ask for one piece of paper and it took 30 days, I
Yeah.
think somebody could argue that's probably not reasonable. But most use the rule of thumb about 30 days.
And maybe that's just a better way to frame it when they get the automatic response, instead of saying reasonable, approximately. I don't want to give a hard and fast rule, because something could take 40 days.
But to that question, are we, because there's a subset, depending on the answer to this question, there's a subset. Are we comfortable with a third party doing that work?
I don't
Rather
think
than
we
the
can
treasurer.
go back to it.
Okay.
Given the history of the system.
Okay, I don't think we, just from where we've been and what we've come out of, I don't know if we can go back to internal. I will say, I was not here for some of that, but I could certainly see that would put the person feeling that in a very weird spot. I know, for example, even when it's about board members, like personal information, Brody sometimes will say, hey, Ashley, I need you want to know. You reach out to them and get that. Because we're cognizant of that separation, right? So knowing that question,
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally fine either way, like, and I also don't think it would necessarily need to be an all or nothing. Like, I don't know that if it is the copier contract or student directory information, or, you know, if there's a way to kind of go. Somebody triage it and say, this needs to go in this branch, this can go in this branch. So,
yeah,
I agree.
Things that we have been fast about, things like that, the stuff that you're gonna see everywhere. We get those filled with consistency purposes, then he's just taking packages, so.
so kind
Because
of,
then it's coming
Does
out
he
of
charge
the
us
state.
15 minutes to?
so kind of to that.
Well,
Right.
So Julie's kind of hit on something a little bit. We can, so right now Brody is the person. Okay, and Brody has his hourly fee. Okay. We talked about a potential change in that model would be good. Because in talking to a different legal counsel about this, when I expressed how our public records were working, I had some questions. Ms. Gary said. He said, sure, I can handle that, but then when I told him how we operate, he was, whoa, okay. I didn't think that's what you were talking about. I thought you were talking about when you had a question, you would send it to me and I'd work through the problem. He didn't realize that Brody was handling every, like truly filling every public records request. There is an opportunity, depending on which direction we go, there's an opportunity for almost like a, kind of like a filter, that if it was something lower priority, lower scale, something like that, you could have somebody in a legal firm do that work at a lesser price point. And then if it was something more complicated, more complex, things like that, it could rise up to a true attorney level fee that they. Would we be interested in it? So for example, I'm gonna use Innocent Britain. I know, Brody's not from there, but what I'm saying is it could be, hey, there's somebody on their team, lesser price points that handles the level A, and they're just working a problem. But when it gets to level C or D, they go, it's kind of outside my pay grade, I'm gonna bump that up to Gary or whoever it might be, and they. That would help our financial, because Brody is a consistent rate, there's no intermediary. Would we?
he has somebody that, he has what they call that, a paralegal that helps him with his stuff. It just,
But he bills us, apparently.
well, actually, it always comes through as Dave Langton. Because Brody being under that, then, for
Is it that same hourly rate though?
the paralegal, that's why we don't pay as much.
So we're doing that now?
Yeah.
So that was not my understanding. My understanding is that it was the flat rate that we were paying Brody the entire time. Okay, well,
Just-
so I'm doing that.
Yeah, certain redactions, things like that. Brody's not personally, he's doing more of a review of that, so.
Who's ultimately responsible, like ORC, like who's held liable, so it does fall.
That's happening, when. Pretty much one of the.
Say that again.
I said, who's ultimately like liable with ORC for compliance? And even, like, I think we ran into a situation, if I recall correctly, where even though legal counsel had done the public records request, we had complied with recommendations of legal counsel. There was a lawsuit brought forward that we still lost essentially, or settled, or however, like that, like, because even the court had sort of changed how they viewed that, is my understanding, and we were still liable, even though we had followed legal's advice.
Is that the
Well,
one?
but that's always the case. I mean, legal is just advice until the
Yeah.
judicial resident.
But I'm saying, I feel like a lot of the reason we're doing that is to protect ourselves. My perception was we were investing the money to avoid the legal liability falling back on the district and to protect us legally. So if we're still losing, even using legal counsel. I
Well,
have
but
to
you're
really
looking at
reflect.
one case versus the
Oh,
ton of redactments that goes through there, right? When you look at the volume of these records.
we've had.
And we're copied on all those, and I see all the redactions, like, make sure to get all those redactions. That takes a certain level of legal scrutiny that I think people focused on, make better sense than leaving this open. I know there was instances of another district with someone who was in our district that they did not redact the personal information, and it caused all kinds of personal turmoil. So, I think if you're not gonna win every case because it's just legal precedent, or, I mean, that's how the process works. But I also think I don't wanna micromanage each individual request either, so I wanna have a system that's stable and operational and gets the records filled in a timely manner that also protects us from the aspersions, because I've seen that in the past years as people didn't trust the records coming out of the district. And I think coming from a third party gives an endorsement that at least somebody impartial is looking at them.
So, but.
Ultimately, they do come out. They're not.
Well, yes, but if I do a records request, right, and it's sent through Brody, right, with a law firm attached. The assumption is that somebody else is facilitating that process in a way to make sure that it's above board, right? Versus my ability to say, or create a narrative that, well, it came from Adam, and Adam was just protecting Doug, and didn't really feel that it's easier to say that versus, and then if there are challenges, we have a law firm to back up and.
So thinking through that, this kind of ties me to a different concept that we kind of talked about. There was a time years and years ago, when I was a teacher for sure, we had a district lawyer. For lack of a better word, in-house, yeah, and they were on retainer, right? They were the lawyer that we used consistently. And some places do that. And
The retainer doesn't seem like district hire. District
It was not
hire
a-
seemed like the article.
so they were not our employer, they were still through their firm. My understanding was
Oh.
they were still through their firm, but they were kind of. They're the
So
Lakota lawyers,
Flat
right?
fee,
Right, flat fee.
Flat fee.
Yeah. So we could explore an opportunity rather than all this. We could explore an opportunity to go to a firm, get bids, go through and talk about, could we have that? Could we have a lawyer that's kind of a flat fee that says, hey, we're gonna charge you X money for the year. Regardless of how many times you call, regardless of what you need, da, 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 da. Now, it wouldn't be, I shouldn't say an attorney, it would be a firm, right? Because an attorney to have it, the expertise of all is rough, right? So you pick a firm that you would kind of have on retainer that would charge you a flat fee and you would be able to call anybody in that firm to get your level of expertise. So I'm just gonna pick on it as, yes, we have Gary, but there's also, Jeremy in that world who's kind of a special ed, right? Gary will tell you, he does some special ed, but if it gets in the weeds, he's gonna pass it off to Jeremy, right? So it would be we could explore having, and we've not talked to any of these legal firms about this, we have to broach this with them. Would there be an opportunity for us to have kind of a flat fee rate? That we work from them rather than an hourly rate? Is there any desire to explore that?
and I'll add on for you guys.
Help me understand what we're trying to solve for, because we're talking about public records and now we're talking about.
Well, if you do.
Restructuring the legal.
But if
right?
you restructure legal, you can bring public records into
No,
that.
but what I'm trying to understand is we're looking at the expenses over 5 years, right? And now
I
we're
think-
having discussions around changing the legal
I
structure,
think we have an
whatever.
opportunity to maybe streamline. And to also probably have a different price point, a better price point within one existing firm rather than all of the different firms that we use.
So when you say streamline, what is that?
Instead of if you look, we're calling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Could we get it down to one firm where we live in that firm and have that level of expertise within that firm, albeit legal expertise, public records, all of that, do it one thing.
So potentially.
And if the goal of that would be,
Cost efficiency.
so we're really looking at saving money.
Saving money and
Consistency.
streamline, I would say streamline.
So then how do I reconcile that with when we have the discussions of sometimes you want a second opinion and sometimes, you said, Burger Grade and they specialize in special ed.
Well-
Is there, or do we lose some value putting it in one house versus the expertise and advice that we're getting?
You could still call them for an hourly rate if you needed a second opinion. But again, 99% of the work would go through the one, and then you would have you can still call any legal firm and get a second opinion, right? But 99% of our business, we would drive through one, and we could still board approve them, we just would call them as frequently as we call them.
And all.
But right now, we don't have 99%. We have it pretty well divided across these firms.
Well,
So
and I think that's where,
understanding.
I think that's where we're, again, some of that's public records, some of that is special ed's comfort with their legal firm. I think there's an opportunity to be more in line in legal work.
And if you pick a firm like Britain, they have all those expertise within the.
For example, the one for special ed, they're calling for the comfort level of special ed. They like who they've done business with in the past. I'm not saying that's right, don't good or bad. They just like their person. It doesn't mean to say we can't get them a new person that we like and love and trust as well. But I think there's an opportunity for us to kind of streamline some of this. And again, a minority of our public records, it's the Brody's firm, but if you block that over, you can kind of clean that level up as well. Now, you're always gonna have the bond counsel and the one-off, those kind of things, but.
You were starting to say something before.
And maybe we like it just the way it is, right? That's why we're just kind of discussing.
I wouldn't recommend. At this time, we can bid it, we can see what it looks like, but at this time, I wouldn't recommend we consolidate everything in for the top of your public records, and we've talked about this many times. I've worked extremely hard to make sure that process stayed clean and unbiased. Because even in the points when we did get records, they had lawsuits against them. There was debates.
There were someone.
There was debates that happened about what was going to be released and what the risk looked like. Because we had an employee that was trying to protect the professional integrity of until an investigation was processed. And we've done a good job with making sure that, like Brody knew, and that was something he's told me many times that he's appreciated, of consistency is going to take precedence. I don't care who it is. We've even had records that was about certain board members that then came for other board members, and we could still lean on consistency. It's not, because it is so easy when things are very volatile to look like there is in the process that then becomes personal. And that's not what we want. So we have talked about that many times, so that's not my recommendation.
Why did you do further? Right, this is just an opportunity to discuss that we like how we're doing business, we want to keep how we're doing business. Are there any opportunities for change or anything like that? I don't want to think anything broken. This is not uncommon what you see, right? But I just want to make sure as we talk, particularly when board members have a history of how we work with public records, is there any opportunity for further discussion or change, or are we good with where we are?
Can we baby step it? If we think that to streamline it better, can we?
You can even all cart.
Mhm.
You can even look at
Can
it with
we,
a
like,
big process,
Can we
bid
keep,
packs, everything.
let's say we keep Brody for now doing, it doesn't concern me the amount of money he charges per hour versus what a junior partner or a paralegal would charge, but if you're saying it's already different, then I feel better about that. But could we try like basic, like if you want special ed to come out of wherever it is now and put it in wherever you want, you decide you want it, is that an option to streamline or to baby step it? Not just
Would you guys like for me to get all the bills and look at them? I mean, I didn't know that we had reviewed any of that stuff besides this.
Well,
I think what we're talking is understanding what kind of opportunities are we looking at, right? So when you say streamline, is it saving 2% on the overall bill, or is it saving 50% on
And
that?
I don't know,
Right.
like a.
And then there's
I don't know
what would we be trading off on that, right? Because put everything in one house, and I will say my perspective, just from an agency world, if you put everything under one house and you have it on call, it's more expensive than a la carte. and specialized. Because they have all the infrastructure and you get faster turnaround, you get service and stuff, but it's gonna be more expensive. I don't know if that's the same in the legal world, but I think doing a lot of work on an assumption that we're gonna get some sort of streamline, I think we need to understand what that streamlining looks like. And I'm very worried about trading off some of the expertise in the systems and the consistency that we've had. So I don't know what it looks like to move specialized from one firm to another. Does that open us up to more?
I think we should get bids. I think we should look at.
Yeah, but I also understand
Just
like what does that
that
transition do from our liability and consistency of support of our special ed families and stuff. So that's where I think there's just this is a big, robust amount of work to say for us to provide any sort of direction.
Is there an opportunity, do we feel like there's an opportunity to look at what that might look like?
I would think so. Look at the,
I
to give what Doug, the information of like to his point.
am looking at
What do we-
$141,000 in expenses this year, and we just set our goals and priorities were these things over here. And so as I look at this,
Maybe it's not.
I mean, if we cut that in half, right, that's less than what the legislature just did to us on that's closing the second village. All right, it's a rounding error on what they did to us.
Well, in our best years,
So I just want to keep us focused.
in our best years, we would land around 36. And that was pre-pandemic.
Yeah,
I mean, that was our trend hourly, as we've always been, is somewhere in the neighborhood of. I would say if you really looked at an average over a 10-year period, which you know, the rates have changed over time. You're probably looking at somewhere in the 225 range.
I mean,
Was it total?
so Burger Graydon does special ed for us. And
Record grade and cross round time, kind of combination.
okay, and Brody and the records requesters with Burger Graydon right now, right? So for last year, we're talking 80, close to $81,000.
A big chunk of the frost rim, Todd, you see here. That's our workers' compensation, which is coming out of the workers' comp fund, so it's kind of separate from forecasted.
Yeah, but I'm saying we're taking a lot of time to talk about $81,000.
Well, so maybe,
And potentially getting that down by getting some paralegals working on, and that's not all Brody, right? That's the
Right,
special
that's
ed.
what-
and that. So we're taking
So I
a lot of
think
time to talk
you're-
about $1,000 of savings.
so I think what I'm hearing is. Not completely broken, so we're okay with time investment wise, we seem to say that this can stay the same. Opportunity wise, is that fair to say?
If there's something we need to address, I'm open to it, but if it's to try to save efficiency and streamline or something.
No,
just don't know
again,
if
this, I don't want to imply that there was anything broken, it was an opportunity to discuss with a new board, right? Legal opportunities,
Well, is there not a way to get to, like,
so.
I don't have
For
any
example.
idea what a in-house or just our own lawyer would be cost, like,
I
is there
have
a
no
way to get. That information?
So a lot of times when you do, like, let's look at bid pack, how we bid things. So what you would do is you do a bid pack, which would be, we would take a look at these bills and you would see that you have human resources, you have the general district, you know, that's catch-all. You would have finance, you would have workers' compensation, you'd have public records, you would have. Probably about it. That's probably going to catch just about everything. So you could say, could you get a bid for whole? Could you get a bid for each individual one? Because then even when we've talked about that, because we talked about doing that and getting them for the board meetings, just
Yeah.
to see what that looked like, but. In my first 2 years, we had some extreme costs. I mean, it got really stretched.
Kind of
But that's
outlier.
where-
I don't think this solution would control those costs.
I know, because
No.
what those.
The number of records and the situations that we were dealing with was the escalators.
And what they'll talk about is you'll normally see every third year, you'll see an uptick because you had negotiations. And so then what you always have is you either have a blend, which they typically don't like. Because then it allows for somebody to come in and undercut them and look like, well, I can come in cheaper and we're blending because we negotiate. To where you have, this is what your flat fee is. In-houses, we've hired them. This is a flat fee versus an hourly. Flat fee, and then if you had negotiation, that becomes an all carte law. You know, because that's more of a one-off,
One-off.
you know, yeah, it's not and we don't want to pay for that to blend over 3 years.
But yes, we could get a big package.
I also think you need to, there should be. Some consideration from the people that work with the lawyers every day. Like a comfort level, a whatever, we don't deal with them on it. You do deal with them on it, but.
My thing on that really does stay heavy on the, when I've had kickback from the community people about certain records, it has been much easier to defend on our end of, and this is why when you've got somebody that doesn't even see everybody every day, doesn't directly work with these people, it's, this is clean, it's even these recordings. Nobody clips, nobody cuts, everything stays clean. That has been one saving grace of in my time as the treasurer, that we have been very consistent with in
And
general.
there's those requests that are way overly broad, like every email
Yeah.
ever sent in the district, right?
Right.
And for us to say, for you to say, well, that's overly broad versus a lawyer, definitely.
And in fairness, we had one that was going to be viewed as extraordinarily overly broad. It produced around 2,500 emails. But because it tied in FERPA with the person's actual student, it now didn't qualify to even fall under that bucket,
Yeah.
which then required, that was a huge one. That would have normally been, this is overly broad. That would sell this as a
Pretty much, like, I'm gonna pick up special ed, this is awesome. You can move out of special ed into a different firm without a student movement. Right, it's just like, they call it a number. Right, and they say, hey, I wanna talk to you, you sort of throw that. Most of the time, to your point, ties to legal firms are about the comfort level or the consistency or the history of your dynamic with that person and the trust of that person, you should need to work through them. So there could be some natural streamlining, not even cost streamlining, there's some natural streamlining, if we want to do that by working with the team members to not say, hey, can we start to pivot from the right, or trying to start to build that relationship over here. Right? So I think, again, I want to make sure I'm hearing correctly. Right now, I think just based on some of our work this morning, priorities, not saying this is not important, maybe we could do some streamlining internally without the monetary needs. But I think we're hearing that, yes, obviously responsible, not sure the savings would be enough to really put an egg in that basket at this time with all of the other work going on. Fair to say? Yes, 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 okay. All right, good conversation. The other piece to talk about is crossing guards. I told you this is very different than our morning conversation, right? Very different. So, crossing guards. So, as you know, before I came in that kind of time period right before I came in, and even some last fall, we have had some very unfortunate occurrences, with children around crossing guards, or in crossing guard, or crossing the street. When I came in, we have had the tragic student death here in Lakota East Section. Then in the fall, we also had the students for the West, who was crossing the street in the library at the West High School. And so during that conversation, kind of my first 6 months, I was in lots and lots and lots of meetings about student safety, right? So we were meeting with engineers, the police department, the trustee, administrators were in the room talking about this safety in general. Those community partnerships that we talked about, right? There was a lot of that in the room to a point. And what I mean by that is we're all coming from our different 20 square feet. We're all coming from our different perspectives. And at the end of the day, there was a lot of whose responsibility is this, right? So for example, if you want to put in like a West, they talked about down the street, putting in a series of just making that area more well lit, doing some things to the curb, those kind of things. Well, that's not us, right? Like I can't change the curb. I can't change the traffic pattern. I can't put up a light, right? Even as something like, if you remember, we did the speed studies, right? There with these freshmen, like we're beholden to other groups to kind of do that work. But in that conversation, it was actually, it was Captain Hageman who said it. He said, there is a crossing guard. And this is the reason we're having this conversation. Crossing guard is a very specific terminology. If you are a crossing guard, you have been trained as a crossing guard. Okay? I say that because what we have, I'm gonna call them crossing assistants, that's what I'm gonna call them. We have crossing assistants currently in a lot of our K-6 worlds. They are not crossing guards. They have not been trained in any way. Okay, other than they're just good Samaritan people, making sure that lights are red or green, and they're telling children to walk and those kind of things. Captain Hageman in that, and again, I think I'm not sure it's Captain Hageman, but a police officer in the room said, I want to be super clear. If you're not a crossing guard that is properly trained, you should not be walking children across the street. You should not be directing traffic. You should not be stopping traffic, none of that. So basically, if I'm at a curb and I want to cross the street, the crossing assistant can look at Kelly if they can. Lights red, let's look those lights. You can cross the street. But they don't go into traffic. They don't walk the kid from point A to point B. Now, the reason I make that distinction is because when I came back from whatever meeting that was last fall and I shared that with our principals were like, that's not what happened. We got some people, we had some people who were maybe trying to do crossing assistance plus, right? They're kind of stretching over into that crossing guard world. And so we said, no, you got crossing assistance. Let's get some parameters in place. Now, take that as crossing assistants we're working, now they're kind of pseudo working. Right, so let me tell you what I mean by that. And I recently had a conversation, you saw the email, I think, from the board, from a parent about crossing guards. Remember that I followed up with. So, kind of two things, that conversation plus a staffing piece. In that staff in the parent conversation, I think there is a desire of our community to perhaps have crossing guards, people that can direct traffic and stop traffic, but helping folks understand that is a special training. There's certain layers to that if you want to have that. Okay. Now let's take this over to the staffing piece. I'm going to pick on Endeavor for a second. Okay. So we don't have crossing guards. We have aides, parents. That's their job description, paraprofessional, an educational aide, those kind of things. Those are the folks being your crossing assistants. The question is starting to come from those staff of, is that my job? Now.
It's in their job description.
No.
Oh, okay, I thought that's what you said,
No.
that's where I was.
They are
Okay.
asking, is that my job? So I went to, Adam, you're my brain, I went to the job description. Doesn't exactly say that, because well, it doesn't say that. Now it says other duties as assigned. But I would argue, that face right there, I would argue if we want certain roles to do crossing assistant tasks, we should put that in their job description. Now let me keep going down this lens. Then you get, I'm gonna pick on Endeavor a little bit. One of the streets in question is not on school property. It's near school, but it's not on school property. So a staff question is, not only is it my job, but can you make me do that job if it's not on school property?
That's fine.
Right?
It doesn't feel right.
Right, see? Now we're off, and I'm just being super, now we're getting doctor's notes and things of that regard from staff to say, my doctor says I can't stand out in the cold and in the rain and kind of do those. So that's just where we are. And I had that conversation with the parents. Okay. So the parent says, the parent was like, well, can't they do that? Well, right now they're an aide. Their job description doesn't say that. We're going to make them do that. Probably needs to be in their job description.
Probably need training.
Well, if they're going to be a crossing, so we could. So let's go through some options here. And then I'm going to get to legal guidance. Okay. We could, I would not recommend them. Other duties as assigned, I would not recommend. I think that is very broad. I don't think that's good faith effort to play nicely in the sandbox to say other duties as assigned. So we could put crossing assistant in applicable job descriptions. We could, and I think this was kind of the parent request or parents request. Well, why can't we have crossing guards? Well, here's the thing. If you're gonna have a crossing guard, they have to be very specifically trained. They would have to have a very specific job description to meet all the requirements of crossing guard training. And you have to pay those people. I'm assuming, don't know, but I'm assuming that pay would be different than an aide or an attendee or whatever, because that's a different role. And you only need the crossing guard at the start of school and at the end of school. Remember how we talked about staff recruitment and training? That's really hard. That's a real hard thing to fill when you only need them for like 2 hours a day. And and the cold and the rain and the pay is probably the pay. I don't know what the pay would be, but the pay would be the pay. To fill that and sustain that could be rough.
Does our
Right.
local police have the ability to do crime?
Hold on, yes, so hold on. Or you say, and this is true, there are some local communities around us that have crossing guards. But they are not the school employees, they are the city and or the police employees. Now, I can tell you again, having broached this about a year ago, the police will say we can't staff it. We can't staff, we don't have the staff right now to staff it, to find that little niche at the beginning and end of the day. Like our SROs, we've already talked about this, we talked about this last fall, an SRO can't go off to do crossing guard duty, because from a police department standpoint, the most vulnerable times of the day are at the beginning of the day, and the end of the day. So the SRO needs to be on the school, not in the crossing guards. So these are some questions that have come up. But yes, you can hire them, you can train them. So I reached out to legal, I reached out to legal and said, hey, thoughts on this? Their thought on this is twofold. One, you either gotta get in the business. And you've got to say, this is not our business, this is the trustees, this is the police, those kind of things. Common practice around us is that it is the police, the township, their practice, not the school district. One of the things he said, and I think this is a reality. Let's say that we have crossing guards that are our Lakota local schools, let's say it's 4 hours a day. If you have a crossing guard out. And I'm just talking sub-reality, you're not gonna be able to find stuff for that. And if that crossing guard is out, and a child who's become reliant on a crossing guard crosses the street, and God forbid something happens, and there is no sub who has replaced that crossing guard, there's some real liability there. And I can tell you, we would not, I can tell you teacher subs, to find a teacher sub for full day, all day with pay is complicated. To find very short windows of crossing guards, I think you'd be hard pressed to be able to do that consistently. And so without a sub, you run the risk of, again, a kid get used to crossing the street with an adult, crossing the street with an adult doing their thing, the adult's not there. The question's gonna be, where was the adult? So this one's not clean, but before we kind of picked a path, and the parent that I spoke to, I did appreciate, she goes, who else can I talk to about this? Let me talk to your elected officials, you can talk to your police department, but I think we've kind of been in this little bit of a gray area where we kind of got this hybrid model that's not working, that's cross consistent, and we kind of need to pick our path of, we're going into this model, or are we gonna say, you know what, we need to voice these opinions to a different entity than us, if it's really following this way of jurisdiction.
Just for a little history, I mean, I had students at Endeavor, but it's been years, and this has been an ongoing issue for well over, like, the whole time I remember being in Endeavor. And as I recall, there was a period of time where we attempted to get into the crossing guard business. We did have it as a posted job. And it was, we couldn't fill it. So that is, I recall, is the reason we went to asking people to do it as a duty, because when it was its own entity, there was a very brief window where somebody took the job and they would not stay in the job long. And again, not to say that will be what happens in the future, but just to provide that history, it was a challenge when we did previously make an attempt to go that route.
One of the things in talking to the parents, some steps that are related to this, but not crossing guards, is in talking to that parent, we have a bus brochure. I don't know when it was made, it looks like 1998, I don't know, it's old, okay? So Betsy's team is updating that, it's about general bus safety. The parent said, well, why don't we just have a brochure about general walker safety? We can do that, Betsy's team is working on that right now. We have a general bus safety, general walker safety. The other thing, which I think was a fair point from this parent, was when you're on campus, not when you're not on a school. When you're on campus as a school, like if you're a driver, like I drop off Addison every day, there is a map that says where you pull in, where you drop off, where the kid gets off in car, right? She said, why don't you have that for walk? And she was picking on Endeavor. She said, when my kid gets on school property, they don't know, do I walk straight and go like across the parking lot? Do I walk around? Do I walk this way? There's not a clear path for like a procedural element for walkers for each school. So our building principals are working on that now. So Betsy's team is working on a revised bus pamphlet and walker pamphlet, and then each building, in addition to their car drop-off map, will have a walker map that tells them a walker ideally, this is the path you take to get to school. That is the most efficient, hopefully stay this way.
Yeah, you're walking between cars doing
Well,
drop off, that's
so-
a problem.
Well, in Endeavor, think about it, the sidewalk. The sidewalk at Endeavor, like it goes around, like the edge, it doesn't really connect to the school, so you have kids. Like. Well, this isn't screaming, straight line, they're just walking straight through the door to the cars, right? So each of those will be posted on their website, the car drop off and the walker, so I think those are good, at least suggestions and steps. But then again, the crux of that conversation, and again, we're starting to really work with LSSA on this, and I think LSSA is getting some feedback from some of their own members about is this appropriate for the roles that are doing.
So I love that story because you made me flash back to 5th grade and safety patrol. And that was what our jobs were, was to make sure that the kids, once they were on the property, went the right way to get to their classes and stuff like that. And I had my little orange belt that went across the shoulder. And,
Oh, yellow.
yeah.
I was a hall monitor, I did that in.
Oh, that was way above my pay grade. I didn't know that. But I think there's ways to think about like how we can leverage the resources of our schools like that. Because we don't have a safety school, at least the schools I've been in. That could solve some of that. I think maps are good, but kids don't necessarily know.
Well, I
maps.
think it's the line now. Assistant not going into traffic.
And we have some assistants now that know they're not supposed to go into traffic, but God.
But they
knows
care
how
about-
they care.
Well, that's the thing, we have a history of really well-intentioned people seeing a problem and doing what they can in the moment to solve the problem. Macroly, we have a community problem. We don't have sidewalks where we need sidewalks, we don't have lights where we have lights. Because of where we are with how our schools are structured, which we try to address with master facilities, we have kids getting picked up in the morning. So I have my freshmen and they go to the bus stop and there's no place to stand. You have to sit on a busy corner with cars going around, buses not obeying the school, the safety laws. And parents are walking them there with flashlights because there's no street lights. That's not even attached to this issue, right? And then we try to solve it by what we control and what we don't control. What we really need to do is we need to get the community, our partners invested in this. I don't think we should be in this crossing guard business. But I think the Westchester Police Department and Butler County Sheriff have a robust amount of resources that they can allocate at different times throughout the day. We do have a lot of different start times that they could balance that workforce across. And if they needed more resources to staff that, I would be all in favor of advocating whatever proponent of fundraising that they do on that. I would argue if they enforce some of the speeding violations around our school buses, that would probably raise enough revenue, but also. If they wanted to do a levy or anything else, that would be a discussion. But I think that's the problem, is that as we get into this to try to solve it, we're not gonna be successful. Because we don't have the ability to maintain it, because it's not just that crossing there, it's all across the board. And I would love to actually invite both the Butler County Sheriff's Office and the Westchester Police Department to one of our meetings. To ask their ideas on how they would approach addressing crossing guard issue. I know it's an expectation because of the history of how everybody's tried to deal with it. I mean, since way before my kids were in the district. And I'd love to hear their perspective on it from us and our community.
Well, there's also realistically. Only a handful of schools that, like you would need, no one's walking to Union, no one's walking to Van Gordon. So to be in the crossing guard business for Freedom, Endeavor, Medina, Shawnee.
Not the early childhood.
Yeah, Liberty Only Shop, yeah, no, not that, like, but Wyandotte. They walk to Wyandotte, but there's also a parent that's okay too. So, yeah, I think if we try to get into the crossing guard business, we are going to be frustrated because of. There's to Julie's point, they won't do it for long.
I think part of, and I'm speaking this from 18 months experience, right? I think part of the issue is you've had, and I don't want to say on purpose, but you know, we've had different entities in the room. Elected officials, school district, police, engineering, kind of office, and I think everybody's kind of went like this, like.
Yeah, not it.
That's not it, and I think one of the questions that parent asked me is, who do I call? If it's not you, I'll respect that, not gonna say I love it, I'll respect that, but you tell me who I need to flow, right, who I need to reach out to. And so I think in splitting the calls and splitting the voice, there's been a lot of clarity about where this lies, so I think if, and I know we still have more discussion, but if we say, hey, you know, we're just not in this business, that is a, you know, we're doing this, here are the things we have done to help this, but really, if you want a true crossing guard experience for the Township of Westchester, you need to call next, and we would communicate that with the people before we kind of share that with them. I think that clarity could help, because right now I think that people just don't know who to go to, so they talk to the person that picks up the phone or answers the email, trying to hope to get somebody to get some back to.
Do we, based on what you've heard, for the crossing assistant, do you feel like if it goes into a job description, we lose people because they don't want to do it?
Oh, I think it becomes in a job description, I think we're starting to see notes that say that people cannot do that because of health reasons, and then therefore we've created a solution to have them create another problem. Like if a doctor's note says you can't do that duty, and it's a doctor's note, you
Question,
have to honor that.
if for local police has the ability to train them, could we then put something out for the people that wanted to receive that training? That, you know, the district could sponsor that training, because I would assume this would be instructional aides who work a 6-hour day. Which then they may have a little time on either end of their day, that then we could have, like, say, an approved miscellaneous rate of pay, perhaps they. You know, we're already doing it with staff that we already had, it sounds like I'm already doing that, because I do know that like some of the positions we have that are. Certain instructional aid classrooms come with a step up pay, but that's for the entire day.
Right.
That's we've captured that with different
Right.
step up pay, or it's not step up pay, it's
Extra break.
pay differential, it's got a pay differential. So I'm not necessarily thinking a pay differential makes sense. But if the people had the training and district paid for the training, if they can provide that, and then they could turn in a timesheet to be paid a certain amount for that, you know, it might not be their hourly, it might be, I don't know, $20 an hour, I don't know what it would be, but.
When they're not there.
Well, that would allow then for, in theory, all of your aides could be trained on if they wanted to.
That could be the ad hoc.
And I don't think they're probably.
I don't know what-
Training them free would be my guess.
No.
No, but district could pay for
I think
that,
on their best,
but then only the people that had the training would be permitted to pick up that work that sounds like it's probably already outside of their normal workday.
No, right now it's doing well.
Well,
Yeah.
but if it's instructional aides, their work days are different.
You have paras, you have payments, you have aides.
I'm going out there.
Some combination, it's not the attendance not to have the students, but between the paras and the aides. We have some rotation of the study today, they're going out there.
I've also
And
seen,
again, I don't think there's consistency when they go
Yeah.
out there.
we have some SROs that are directing traffic too, at
That aren't
non-walking buildings, so if we. And it seems like there's gonna be some big impact if we just say, we're not in this business, so we need to figure out what.
I would rather be in the crossing assistant business than I would the crossing guard business. I don't feel like that's the business we need to be in. But I also think, to your point, and we've heard this and we know this. That Captain Hageman says that that's the most vulnerable time. But I also know when I come to a meeting in central office and I drive down Princeton. The SRO at Liberty is standing in street traffic for drop on big one. So. They're doing it, we've got to figure out how to bridge that. So that he is where he's supposed to be. And not, and that's not even, that's not as much a crossing, again, it's a traffic thing, because the traffic backs up there, because people are turning in.
So we as a community have an obligation to make sure our kids will get safe to school.
I'm just gonna ask a question.
As a community,
Is
As a
that-
community, I'm saying, like,
Is that a parent, is that a parent or a community? And I'm just asking. Because I'm just asking,
Maybe a good question.
because I asked that question to that parent, I got her answer. Because because this particular parent is not on school property, it's pretty far into the neighborhood. And she's, because I said, the parent was going to do that. And she had a response, I would just say, whose responsibility is that? And that's probably a multi-pronged answer.
and
Bus
who's,
driver,
I
walker,
think there's a lot of assumptions around family structures and family.
and
that's
where,
right.
Embedded in it.
and where is the line, like,
Mhm.
this is in her neighborhood, she wants us to put a crossing guard in her neighborhood. Where do you draw the line, is it just between that one side of the street and the school?
Well, I think if it's in the job, let's say we go the job description route, it would have to be on school property.
Yeah.
It would have to be, because otherwise. I don't know how you could say
How you
the
make
job
it,
if it's not on school property.
But I also don't know how you straight face look at an SRO and he sees elementary school kids crossing a busy street.
Right.
And he's not out there making sure that they don't get hit on.
And again, I don't wanna speak for Captain Hageman, like Captain Hageman, at least the meeting I was in, said. The SRO should be in the building, they have dismissal and they couldn't say, now, I don't know, I'm not a trained police officer, and I don't know those statistics, but. And his point in that meeting was, we don't have the staff to do both. Like, I can't have somebody out there like helping the kids and the building.
Well, that's why it's a community discussion. Right?
I don't understand why, and maybe it's a discussion for our trustees and our police, I don't understand why a Liberty Township sheriff can't be at Liberty when officer, whatever, I forget his name, Mike, I think is in the building at dismissal, it's 20 minutes, maybe, like. I know they say they can't staff it, but. I don't know, why can't Westchester Police be at the Endeavor Crosswalk for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon? Now, I get that there will come a point. Potentially, where there's some Uber situation and they can't be there. Then that's that false sense of security, what happens to the kid if they can't guarantee it. I think that this is more of a community discussion. Are we having a safety update anytime in March? Okay, which is an executive session. Is there any way to put this on the agenda for them as we're in executive session talking about this? Put a little, for lack of a better word, pressure and be like. If something happens, everyone is going to be put in the hot seat, the police, the district, the parent for.
Well, and if you remember, I think. You know, we had the safety panel,
Right.
last fall. Which I think was a good discussion. But. I don't know what solutions take on,
No, I don't think we're gonna do that. So,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
I mean, because I do think there's a little bit of. Well, you'll take care of that, or you'll take care of that, it's kind of like the lights there less, right? I mean, there was the question of, well. We'll put in the lights, but you're gonna pay the utility bill for forever. Wait a minute, no, right, like, let's talk about that, so there's a little bit of that, like. Again, whose jurisdiction?
I wanna make sure. That however we have this discussion, where does it belong? Is it in an executive session or does it belong in an open meeting? Just because. I would define one safety protocols going into the executive session, but I think.
they're coming in.
I think it's,
So I'm
yeah,
just saying.
same, yeah, but I think. It's interesting how we can facilitate those discussions in a forum where the community hears its answers, right? I think it's very different when the township trustee or engineer or county or whoever is making that allusion to say, hey, yeah, we'll put in lights, but you guys have to pay a utility bill. And the people hear it, right? Our families hear it, because I think families will be like, well, yeah, that's fine, we'll pay it, we want the safety. Or they'll be like, well, then they'll object. It's the fact that we're having these one-off conversations and not having a broader community conversation about it.
And
And
maybe
if
that's,
it's our meetings or we host a town hall and let people come in on safety. I mean, I think we saw how many people showed up after these incidents. I imagine if we were to host something, we'd have the same kind of turnout, and I would love to have that conversation with our.
maybe it's a community conversation with all of them in the room. Now, the problem we have with that is that we don't always get them to commit to be in the room, but we really need that. We do need the engineer to say, we'll put the light in utility. We need police to say, we can't staff it.
I do think we have I mean, there's a long-term need, but a short-term need. We have a staffing issue right now, and that it's not in the job description. There are people who are rightfully so questioning, is this within the scope of my work? That is a shorter term issue.
But we still want the assistant who's out there saying lights red, but if we can't get anybody to do it.
And it might be complicated because it's different based on your building's experience. So it might be town halls at those individual buildings to get that parent group out there, because I can talk about it never, but I've been there 5 times, right? So what does my matter? It's the families who have their kids that are going there and our partners in townships and the sheriff's office to have that conversation about that specific building and the expectations that we have.
Well, I'm thinking differently, like, are there opportunities to put in a traffic light that blinks yellow except for half an hour a day? And so that half an hour a day, it's not the walk and the stop for the kids. And it's a traffic light that's only there part-time. Can we partner with that with the Butler County? Engineer, like, are there opportunities that don't require human capital, but can allow for a solution that is different, and while maybe a short-term expense, it's a long-term solution. So I also think we need to explore different opportunities, given that we have been struggling with finding a solution that works with human capital.
Well, and I think that, again, to your point, like, those are good questions to ask and to let the community hear the answers that we've been told about things like that. So it's not, we're not trying, we're just be hitting roadblocks. Like, what was the conversation about the light? Like, if we wanted a light at these freshmen.
I mean,
Well, and that, you can't put them that close together, because then the traffic backs up on Sin Day and they won't do it. But that's not our choice to make, and I think sometimes there's not a clear understanding of what we have.
it deals with kiddos.
What we have, yes,
Right.
what we have to do and what we don't have to do. And yeah, so. But
Do we want to continue in the crossing assistant business? And or do we want to perhaps have a community engagement this week, I think, to talk about an opportunity to have those conversations in the future and engage the community, but in the short term, do we want to have the crossing assistant be part of a role or responsibility, or are we taking that out and then crossing solving for a long term?
So what happens next Wednesday when they're not doing that job?
right, that was gonna be my thing. Now the child is used to having that crossing assistant there and they're not there. What are we gonna do? Like, how are we going to navigate that? Do we think we have enough people in whatever building that this is happening to do it while we figure out the long term? Now it's getting nice outside, so people might want to sit outside, but I worry that it's mid-year.
I would anticipate, again, the value judgment on the, I would anticipate that if crossing assistance continues as a being association, something like that. Is that the scope of really, I mean, questions that we can answer, because that's been the scope of the road, their role, job description, can handle that, where the property handle that.
Can we change our job description mid-year? You know, like,
So it would not go into effect, well, yes, you can, but then you're getting ready to see all of the job descriptions in a couple weeks. We can add that in there, and then it's.
So sorry to interrupt. I did bring a king cake for Fat Tuesday. I don't more love to have some.
Did you find the baby yet?
Nobody's found a baby yet. Some people took some to go ones for the family. If you get it, you're good luck. So, but help yourself.
So, normally job descriptions are year to year, because people are doing a good job. So we changed the job description, like I changed the custodial once in the past, right, prior to snow time. Basically call those people and they exchange and we let them know what has been added, it's crafted or well modified. We give them the people make the appropriate decision at that time. But normally you approve them and then start cleaning the next year so people know what they have. Stop.
I think we need a short-term solution for those things.
Long term, I feel like, long term, I hear people with dates and all, maybe by building, maybe by district. We could talk with, SRO opportunities, we could, you know. We could bring them into executive session, I think we could even maybe sponsor a training in good faith, if people want to get that training, if the police are hired, and we can talk through some of those. I think the short term question is a little bit different.
Well, I see this as an operations issue. And so I don't know if it falls with you or those individual buildings, but how do you balance the student safety versus the issue that we have with job descriptions and staffing?
And
And it may be a multi-pronged approach that is a building by building approach, but I don't think I have the expertise to kind of say this is what works for Endeavor. I think there's not a desire to go into the business of crossing guards, I think, at this point.
you asked my opinion, but that's the reason that we're bringing it up here. It is operational, there's some governance impact. I would say we get out of the crossing the system and cross the park business. So that's what I would suggest, because I think, retention and hiring, thinking of that, I would be an A. That doesn't mean I wouldn't stand out and have any control of whether it was crossing the street or anything like that. I think that it's different, that's a different role. I wanted to do that, I signed up to do that, I'm choosing to do this. I also think, it just, when I look at an A role, that feeling when we had that into the job description, it would seem like different, like you'll be reading and go, that's weird. Not that you can't put it there, I just feel like it feels that way. But if we come out of that business, I do think there is an opportunity for us to grow in the community, and so I wanted to bring it up and let's have a discussion so that we can say, hey, absolutely, tonight this is why, but know that we're partnering with, and we probably talked about community engagement on Friday. Opportunities to have that planned sooner rather than later. It's sometime soon, sooner rather than later, to talk about what those long-term opportunities are, to say, hey, yes, we're doing this, but we at least have something on the books to talk about what this looks like long-term.
Do you see that as being immediate or end of the year or the timing to?
I think it could be, I mean, I think it could be March or April. Because I think it's multi-pronged. We would. Also, we have a soft launch of the crossing assistance getting pulled back right with our staff. Then we would have a conversation, I would say, with the police departments, to say, hey, here's what we're doing, we want to partner with you, tell us how you can help.
At least in the short term.
At least in the short term.
They just,
Right,
that's
in the short term. And then. Hey, we're not trying to like, we want to prepare you, this is gonna be a conversation, we want to give you an opportunity to think about your ideas in this round. And then we bring all those people together for a community conversation to say. Here's kind of our parameters, we put in place guardrails, here's why. Police, they're gonna talk about what they're gonna do, and then we can talk about. Here from the community where they're concerned, this kind of piece.
I do worry with the mid-year change of pulling back the assistant roles and that impact. So if that's gonna happen, I think we have to be incredibly clear with our families. So families have the opportunity to create the plan, if that's something to come to rely on with some notification.
I'll be honest, I don't have a good pulse.
And that's like time.
Yeah, I have, like, I was thinking maybe like spring break-ish, because you have a break, you can kind of adjust, this type of thing. I don't know, I mean, safety is a big concern on Katie, but this particular issue of crossing off, I do want to be very clear. I've got one phone call with you about it, and it's, you got, right? But I know that person, or I was told that they put on Facebook, hey, share your concern with me so that I can express some stuff. I don't know how many people shared it, so I don't know. I don't know how big of a topic this is, but I'm sure if it impacts your 20 square feet, it's gonna feel like a big top, right? Because like I said, when you're not impacting and we take it away, you don't have to give like thought. Then when we are currently, so I don't have a good scope of. 20 people, we talking 400 people, we talking 2, I don't have a good scope of that.
I can say again, historically, having been at Endeavor for the. Like, whatever it was, 20 years, I would say, or whatever. It was often a topic. It was an ongoing topic, whether when there were people who were standing in the road with their signs, cars practically running over the person with the stop sign, like. It's a concern, even with somebody trying to assist with the blinking stop sign and their vest.
Well, that's my concern, the other, and I was thinking that the other end of my concern legally and safety wise is. You have a crossing assistant that doesn't have it in their contract and they go out to the crosswalk and make it hit. So we are then liable for that.
Well,
Because we've had somebody do something that they weren't supposed to do.
correct, and if the crossing assistant tells a child to cross.
Yeah.
And something happens, and again, like. Something as simple, I don't be mentioned like the vests and the signs and stuff, like the Adam's point about the training, that's all involved in the training. Hey, I did it, I'm gonna tell you, when we got busing at the high school, they gave me orange vest, sent me outside, said you're out of traffic.
We had that also.
I had no training, but I had my orange vest, right?
When we lost.
Like, it's a thing to wear that orange vest
Radio.
and hold the sign, that
You were a
means
teacher.
something, I was a teacher. And I had no training or anything, I mean, it worked, thank goodness, right, but like, there is some definite liability with that, if you don't have that, which a police officer. Has all liability and all that training, and. So I do think that's an opportunity to look at our police and say, hey,
Partner with us for the short term until we can figure out the long term, so it should follow.
I'll keep you, so I think I've got some clarity here, and I'll keep you posted on that. But we don't wanna just pull the crossing assistant, but tomorrow, we need to take the time with that, the communication of that. We need to talk to the police even before we do that too, to make sure there's not something we don't know or anything like that. And then ultimately, we would have a community engagement opportunity with perhaps partners of police there. So they would have a discussion of what that would look like and present good ideas and everything. Again, I brought this up here because while certainly more of a operational piece, there are tentacles, to our community piece, right? And partnerships and stuff like that. Okay. All right. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule. It's about 11:20. And I think we had some really good conversations, right? If we go back to our original goals, it was to build trust. And we've started that. Right? I don't think that's ever done. Like you are always building, or you're either making deposits or deletions. That's just how it works, right? So we're going to continue in that regard. I think we've talked about our roles and our responsibilities, even in this very last conversation. Where does it land and how do they impact each other, right? Because sometimes they certainly do. Building common understandings of expectations and processes. I think talking through that governance document was super helpful in keeping that in front of us. And then defining the work together. I think that conversation about those strategic buckets was super helpful this morning. And so I'll print as something to kind of keep that in the forefront of our mind. I won't put masking tape on here. On your thing. But we'll find some work of that, but just know, I was reflecting the other day, I think this in my time, this is I think it's our 4th retreat, right? Which sounds like a lot, like sometimes when I tell that people are like, really, they're like 18 months or something, how do you have 4? But I think these cadences are really helpful for us, right? We were having them about quarterly, I think there was a little bit of struggle, we might have missed 1 quarter. But I think they're helpful for us to calibrate, to keep in tune with each other, and especially anytime we have transitions, I think it's important to make sure that those voices are heard, and seen, and felt in the room, and how those change our perspective and warp our perspective, while also still having our ground stuff. So I will keep us on pulse, to have these. Also know that in your preference sheet where you talk to me about text and email and things like that, there'll be some team building where we might not be in full retreat mode, but we might have to do some some fun team building together. One day I'm gonna play paintball, one day. I'm not saying with the government team, but my goal one day is to have paintball with some team building activity. Except not Adam, because Adam, no, Adam is with the night vision goggles and we, Adam's. Exactly, I've already thought of that.
Be the last person,
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, all our regrets.
So good after dark,
What we do.
I can warm up with paintballs. See what I'm shooting.
I mean, our next one may only be one day for it.
Correct.
We don't have.
We don't always do two,
Don't
we always
always
do
do
2 days.
back to back, except when we have a new.
We were waiting on
person
you to come back with trust falls then.
So,
I just wanna say thank you for being here. We do exciting work together, we do exciting work together. And just thank you.
and we appreciate all that you and Adam have done to get everything ready and to have open conversation and like that. So at that point, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Zane, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Wynn,
Yes.
Mr. Argo,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
and Ms. Casper.
No, they're not. I think posted